Before we begin, listener, remember to gently tap like and subscribe so you won't miss the next story. Tonight, I'll take you through the quiet halls where the walls still breathe, where every sound means something, even when no one's there to make it. 5 stories, each one a whisper left behind by those who never truly left. So, turn down the lights, lie still, and listen carefully, because some sounds don't stop when you wake up. Story 1. The tomb that whispers back. I remember the first breath of heat when we broke through the last layer of stone. Not the dry warmth of desert air, but something thicker, like exhalation from a sleeping throat. We'd been digging for weeks, tracing a cluster of anomalies beneath the dunes, mapping the hollow on our screens. The locals refused to come near the site after sunset. They said the sand talked here. We laughed, set up our floodlights, and let the generators hum away the superstition. When the opening finally appeared, it was just a slit of darkness at my feet. No grand doorway, no carved warnings. Yet as I knelt beside it, the air seemed to pulse against my skin. In, out, in, out. Slow, patient. I switched off my headlamp for a moment to test the darkness. That was when I heard it. Not the echo of the team behind me. Not the wind against the scaffolding, but a small, dry voice rising from the black below, shaped exactly like my own, repeating the last thing I'd said. Open it. All the way. But this time, it added one more word I did not say. Please. The others didn't hear it. Or at least, no one reacted. I stayed crouched at the edge of the opening, letting the echo of that whispered please fade into the heavy air. My pulse thumped against my ribs, out of rhythm with the quiet breathing sensation rising from the chasm. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, a trick of acoustics. Nerves stretched thin after weeks of excavation, but when I leaned closer, the warmth brushing my face felt intentional, almost curious. Everything all right down there? Collins called from the generator line. I straightened too quickly. Fine, I said, though my voice came out thinner than I intended. The moment the words left me, something far below repeated them, half a second late. Fine. Collins didn't flinch. Either he couldn't hear it, or he'd learned, like many seasoned researchers, to pretend sound behaved normally in places buried too long. We set up the preliminary lamps along the rim, their beams sliding uselessly into the darkness. The hole was narrow, then widened abruptly, the scanners showing a chamber large enough to swallow our entire camp. The readings were wrong in ways none of us could articulate. Temperatures fluctuated every few minutes. Pressure dipped, then spiked. Once, briefly, the motion sensors detected footsteps inside, though none of us were down there. While the team discussed rigging the harness, I stepped aside, adjusting the receiver on my handheld. A faint tapping pulsed through the device. Talk, talk, talk. Not rhythmic like machinery. More like someone knocking gently on wood, waiting for an answer. Each tap was mirrored a moment later by the walls around us. Soft vibrations running through the sandstone. The dune felt alive beneath my boots, shifting as if it were holding its breath. I swallowed hard. Anyone picking up seismic interference? I asked. A couple of glances. Shrugs. Someone muttered about faulty equipment. But the tapping continued. Clearer now. Talk, talk, talk. Then a pause. Then, unmistakably, talk, 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 5 rapid knocks, as if responding to my heartbeat accelerating. I backed away, but the warmth of the opening followed, brushing my calves like fingers reaching upward. Collins came to stand beside me. "You look pale. If you're not up for descending first, we can rotate." I opened my mouth to reply, but the chamber below answered before I could. "Rotate." This time the voice was loud enough that Collins turned sharply. I waited for him to say something, anything, but he simply stared into the darkness with a stunned, unreadable expression, as though he were hearing not my words, but someone else's. The warmth pulsed once more. A long inhale, a longer exhale, and from beneath that, the softest whisper, "Come down," a whisper using my cadence, but shaped like no human breath. The harness creaked as the team secured it to the anchor bolts, the metallic clatter echoing across the dunes. Yet beneath that familiar noise, another sound threaded upward, a low, tremulous vibration that didn't bounce like an echo should. It rose straight from the depths, as if the chamber were humming in anticipation. I tried to steady my breathing, but the tomb seemed to breathe with me, sinking to each inhale, each tremor in my chest. Every time my lungs filled, a faint swell of warm air flowed upward. Every time I exhaled, the warmth faded and the tapping began again. Toke, 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 toke. Slow, patient, counting me. Collins lowered himself to the edge and tested the first rope, his lamp beam slicing into the dark. "We go in pairs," he said. "Minimal disturbance. No shouting. No," his words cut off. We all felt it, the sudden shift of pressure, like being pulled inward by an invisible tide. The sand at our feet trembled. Tools rattled on the ground. Even the floodlights flickered as though the air itself grew too thick to carry electricity properly. Then the chamber below exhaled. A deep, cavernous moan rolled up the shaft, heavy enough to ruffle my shirt and send grit swirling in small eddies around our boots. It wasn't wind. It was too deliberate, too warm, too alive. "Generator surge," one of the interns asked, but the generator was silent. It had died without a single sputter. The sudden quiet pressed in on us until the whispering began again. Not one voice this time. Dozens, a mesh of overlapping murmurs, forming a droning chorus that filled the opening like a hive of insects reciting words they didn't understand. Some whispers matched our tones. Some didn't. Some rose higher, sharper, edged with desperation. Others sounded tired, stretched thin, as though they'd been repeating themselves for centuries. I stepped closer, unable to help myself. The whispers shifted immediately, orienting toward me, growing clearer, closer. Follow. Down, down, down. The ground trembled again, harder this time. Fine cracks snaked across the rim of the opening. For a terrifying instant, I imagined the entire dune collapsing inward, swallowing us into whatever waited below. But the tremor stopped abruptly, replaced by a new sound. A low, scraping drag. Something moving. Something large. Something steady. Collins swung his lamp downward. The beam didn't reach the floor of the chamber, but it illuminated the rough walls sliding past, and something else, faint indentations, worn smooth as though many hands had touched the stone over the years, or claws, or something in between. The scraping grew louder, more insistent. It was accompanied by the whispering chorus rising in pitch, as though urging the movement upward. Everyone stepped back, Collins said quietly. Now. But the moment we did, the whispering stopped. All of it. A silence so complete dropped over us that my ears rang with its weight. Then, a single knock. Talk. Sharp. Solid. Directly beneath my boots. I stumbled back, heart lurching. But the knock followed, this time on the opposite side of the opening. As if something was tracing our positions one by one. Talk, 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 talk. 5 knocks. 5 of us standing there. The chamber inhaled again. A slow pull that tugged at my clothes and made my hair lift from my skin. And then, impossibly, the darkness below began to brighten. Not with light, not really, more like a faint, shifting glow, as though something bioluminescent stirred in the depths, rising inch by inch. The glow pulsed with the same rhythm as the knocks, growing stronger with each beat. Collins swore under his breath, "Whatever's down there," but the chamber interrupted him, mimicking his tone with chilling accuracy. "Whatever's down there." Then, in a deeper voice, "He is coming up, Haim." The glow surged higher, licking the stone walls with pale, ghostly light. And for the first time since arriving, I realized the tomb wasn't waiting for us to enter. It was climbing to meet us. The glow rose until it hovered just below the lip of the opening, smearing pale light across our boots and tools. It wasn't steady light. It pulsed like something alive, as though the source had a heartbeat that didn't quite match any human rhythm. Slow, then quick. Slow, then quick. 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 Collins grabbed my arm. Step back. But the glow reacted instantly to his touch. It surged upward, brightening, as if it recognized contact or wanted it. I felt the warmth unfurl along the sand, creeping over my ankles. It wasn't like heat from a lamp or fire. It was soft, humid, strangely intimate, like breath grazing skin. The whispers returned, but this time, they weren't murmuring from below. They rose around us, curling through the air, as though the sand itself carried them. You came. You opened. You heard. We heard you. The glow flickered sharply, and something within it shifted. A silhouette, indistinct, but unmistakably shaped like a figure climbing toward us. "Ropes," Collins ordered. "We seal the opening now." But as 2 of the team moved to drag the tarpaulin sheets across the rim, the figure inside the glow froze. Its outline sharpened. Then it leaned toward me. It didn't speak. The whispers did. "Not them. You." I forced myself to look away, focusing on the generators, the equipment, anything normal. But the air thickened, gripping my throat with the weight of old humidity, the smell of earth, stone, and something else, something sweet, like decayed herbs poured out of the opening. Then came the knock. Talk. Not below. Behind me. I spun around. Nothing but the dunes and the dead quiet of evening. Then, talk. Closer. Against the scaffolding pole behind my shoulder. The metal trembled at the impact, though there was no visible movement. Collins reached for my shoulder again. We're retreating to camp. Regrouping. Recalibrating. Whatever this is, he didn't finish. He couldn't, because the chamber below repeated him, word for word, in perfect imitation of his voice. We're retreating to camp. Regrouping. Recalibrating. Then, as if shedding the borrowed tone like an old coat, The voice deepened into something older, cracked by centuries. But you cannot retreat. The glow convulsed, flaring upward. For one horrifying moment, the entire chamber lit up enough for us to see the inside. And what we saw didn't obey any map or scan we had made. The chamber walls weren't smooth. They were layered, as if carved by hands, one generation after another, all leading toward a central stone column wrapped in what looked like bands of ancient linen. The linen writhed, tightening itself like the coils of a living thing. Something was bound inside it, something enormous. The glow dimmed. The vision faded, but the outline of that column burned behind my eyes. Then the ropes anchoring the harness snapped. Not frayed, not pulled loose, cleanly severed, as though sliced by something razor sharp. The cut ends dangled toward the opening, swaying gently as if someone below had tugged them. One of the interns screamed. The sound cracked through the air, and the chamber echoed it instantly, but stretched, deeper, as though an older version of that scream bellowed from another age. The reflective shock wave of the sound trembled the sand. The dune shifted beneath our feet, sinking a few inches with a soft whump. I gasped, instinctively jumping back only to feel the ground behind me pulse upward, as though responding to my movement. No, not responding. Anticipating. The whispers closed in from every direction now, forming words that almost made sense. The keeper, the breath, the voice that opened us. Me. They meant me. The figure of light rose higher until it stood just below the rim, still formless, but unmistakably aware. Its presence pressed into my skull, not as a thought, but as a sensation like pressure behind the eyes before a migraine. Collins pulled me backward, but the glow surged, following, and for the first time, the figure spoke with its own voice. Not mine, not anyone's. A hollow, resonant sound like wind passing through a throat made of stone. Let me see the one who answered. The light lashed upward, scattering sand into the air. The particles floated unnaturally long before drifting down, as though trapped in a different gravity. I stumbled back with the others, but the figure didn't climb out. Instead, it pressed one hand-shaped silhouette onto the stone rim. The stone hissed, cracked, crumbled to dust beneath its touch. The chamber inhaled again. A slow, immense pull, and something deep inside whispered, so softly only I heard it. You recognize my voice because it was yours first. For a few heartbeats, none of us moved. We waited for the figure to pull itself fully into our world, for the glow to rise again, for the whispers to swallow the night. But instead, the light recoiled. It didn't vanish so much as fold in on itself, retreating down the shaft in a slow, spiraling motion. The pressure in the air eased. The sand beneath our boots settled. Even the warmth thinned into the cool desert breeze. Someone exhaled shakily. Someone else muttered a prayer. Collins tightened his grip on my arm, not dragging me this time, just grounding both of us. It's pulling back, he whispered. It's dormant. Maybe we triggered a displacement pocket, a pressure reaction, or an optical. Collins, I said quietly. It spoke. He froze. The others looked away, grateful for any explanation that didn't require acknowledging what they'd heard. Still, the surface remained calm. The tomb lay silent, no longer breathing in sync with me. No knocking, no glow, no shifting of sand, only the faint, dry sigh of the desert evening. For a moment, an absurd hope flickered through me. Maybe whatever intelligence lived down there had exhausted itself. Maybe it needed time to recover. Maybe we were safe, at least for now. We covered the entrance, Collins said at last, voice steadier. We'll regroup at camp, get the generator back up, recalibrate the instruments. We'll treat the chamber like any unstable dig site. No one goes near it until we understand what we're dealing with. Everyone agreed with suspicious speed. We pulled the heavy tarpaulin over the opening. The fabric sagged slightly, as if the mouth of the tomb inhaled beneath it. But it held. The sight gave a strange sense of finality, like closing the lid on something better left unexamined. As we walked back toward camp, I kept waiting for the whispers to return. They didn't. The night seemed almost ordinary, lanterns swaying gently, equipment cases lined up, stray scraps of paper fluttering along the sand. The generator clicked uselessly when Collins tried to restart it, then sputtered back to life on the second attempt, the hum returning like a heartbeat of familiarity. Even the interns began to talk again, their voices soft but normal, grounded, human. I allowed myself to breathe easier, just a little. Dinner was quiet but calm. The lamps burned steadily. No unnatural warmth brushed against my skin. No echo repeated my words. I forced myself to focus on the scrape of utensils, the shuffle of sand under boots, the crackle of the lamp flame. All so normal they felt like a blessing. We'll send the preliminary scans back to the Institute tomorrow, Collins said. We'll structure a descent plan that minimizes direct contact with the chamber. And we'll bring in acoustic specialists. He couldn't quite say to investigate the voices, but I nodded anyway. The desert wind picked up slightly, fluttering the tent flaps in a soft, rhythmic motion. Flap, flap, flap. It almost resembled the knocking pattern from earlier, but quieter, harmless. The kind of sound you could chalk up to nerves, superstition, fatigue. After hours of tension, the mind wants to surrender to any explanation that grants relief. I cleaned my hands, checked the equipment crates, and tried to convince myself the worst had passed. A strange incident. Yes. An acoustic anomaly. Possibly. A psychological echo effect after prolonged isolation. Anything but a thinking presence waiting below. By the time I retreated to my tent, the weight in my chest had loosened. I even managed a faint laugh at myself as I set down my recorder. I'm fine, I murmured. Just tired. Very tired. I froze. My recorder off until that moment clicked. The small red light blinked alive, though I hadn't touched it. A faint static hissed from the speaker. Then my voice spoke softly through the device. Just tired. Very tired. My stomach dropped. That wasn't what unsettled me most. It was what came after. A second voice layered beneath mine. Not an echo. Not a distortion. A different timbre entirely. Older. Hollow. And unmistakably rising from somewhere underground. Rest then. We will wait. The static cut out. The light died. And from far outside the tent, muffled beneath meters of sand and canvas, I heard a single, patient knock, talk, the exact rhythm of something counting and resuming. The knock didn't fade. It repeated slow, deliberate, waiting. Talk, 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 talk. 4 soft after beats. like something trying to recall the rhythm of a human pulse. I held my breath. Outside, the desert wind had died entirely. The silence felt unnatural, thick as cloth pressed over my ears. Even the usual creaks of the tents, the low hum of the generator gone. As if the night itself were listening, I couldn't stay inside. Unzipping the tent felt like pulling open the lid of a coffin. Cold air rushed in, mingling with the lingering warmth that still clung to my skin from the tomb's breath earlier. Lanterns flickered across camp, stretching long shadows between the tents. But something felt off. The shadows were too long, too stretched, as though the source of light were lower than it should have been. I stepped out slowly, scanning the dunes. "Collins," I whispered. A distant flutter. Not wind. Not movement from camp. Something shifting under the sand. The knock sounded again, closer now. Right beside the perimeter rope. I crossed to the nearest lantern, gripping it with both hands. The metal was strangely warm, as though it had been touched seconds before I arrived. "Anyone awake?" I called. Louder. My voice trembled. Silence. The camp felt abandoned, though I knew everyone had been awake minutes earlier. I moved toward Collins's tent. The flap hung open, swaying gently. A faint line of footprints led inside, but none came out. I raised the lantern and stepped in. Empty. His cot was still unrolled, gear untouched, but the air felt disturbed, heavy, thick with the same warm sensation that drifted from the tomb. A faint whisper drifted past my ear. "Down." I spun around. No one. The whisper came again, this time from the opposite side of the tent. "Follow." A chill crawled up my spine. It wasn't speech carried through air. It was more like the words were forming inside the tent walls, breathed through the fabric. I bolted outside. "Collins," I shouted. No response. But the knock answered. Talk. Right beneath the sand in front of me. The dune trembled. A circular ripple spread outward across the surface, like something pushing upward from below. I stumbled back and the sand buckled, collapsing inward a few centimeters. Then again, and again, something was rising. No, something was climbing. I didn't wait to see it emerge. I sprinted toward the tarpaulin-covered opening, heart pounding so hard the world blurred around the edges. The tarpaulin was no longer flat. It bulged upward sharply, as though someone or something was pressing against it from below, testing the fabric's strength. It pulsed. Inhale. Exhale. I staggered back, horror twisting through me. The tomb wasn't dormant. It was waking, and it was waking through us. Behind me, the generator coughed once, twice, then roared to life. But something was wrong with the sound. The hum was too deep, too resonant, vibrating through the sand like a tuning fork. A second tone layered beneath it, low, throaty, rising like a chant. I spun around. The tents, every one of them, were trembling. Their canvas rippled from the inside outward, as though hands were pressing against the fabric from within. "Collins!" I screamed again. A tent to my left collapsed inward, sucked toward the ground as though something beneath had dragged it down. I heard a muffled cry short, cut off, and then only the eerie, rhythmic knocking rising in its place. My mind raced. I needed to run. But where? The dunes stretched endlessly in every direction. The vehicles were parked near the ridge, half a kilometer away. Another tent collapsed. Then another. The knocks grew faster. Tock, 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 tock. Too many to count. Too rapid. Too hungry. A burst of warm air blasted from the tarpaulin, the tomb exhaling with terrifying force. The fabric whipped upward, tearing free of its stakes and spiraling into the sky like a seized sail. The opening yawned before me, and the glow returned. This time, it flooded upward in a violent column, a geyser of pale light that illuminated the dunes for hundreds of meters. Within it, I saw shapes dozens, maybe more writhing in slow motions, as though trapped behind a veil. Whispers exploded from the depths. Come down. Not one voice. All of them. Voices echoing from every throat that had ever spoken near the chamber. Voices too old to imagine. Voices that weren't human at all. My legs wobbled. The heat washing from the opening clung to my skin like wet breath. For a moment, I felt myself leaning forward, pulled by the hypnotic rhythm of the whispers. Then, a hand grabbed my collar and yanked me sideways. I crashed into the sand. The lantern flew from my grip, skittering across the ground. I rolled over, gasping. Collins, pale, sweating, trembling but alive. Move, he rasped. We run. Now, he dragged me up. We sprinted toward the ridge. Behind us, the glow surged higher. Sand lifted from the ground in swirling spirals. Defying the windless air, the whispers chased us, overlapping, building into a deafening wave. Don't leave. Voice, breath. Open, 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 open. We ran until my lungs burned, until the dune slope tilted beneath our feet. A distant silhouette, the vehicles came into view. Salvation. Halfway there, Collins stumbled. I seized his arm, pulling him upright. He looked at me and froze. His eyes widened with terror. What? I gasped. He raised a shaking hand and pointed at my chest. At first, I felt nothing, just my own ragged breath. Then I heard it, a second breath layered beneath mine. Not in the air, inside me. Warm, rhythmic, calling something upward. I staggered back. No, I whispered. No. The whispers behind us swelled in triumph. We are already here. Collins stared at me as though I were no longer someone he recognized. The second breath inside my chest grew heavier, settling beneath my ribs like a living weight. Each inhale felt less like mine and more like something else sinking with me, learning me, filling the spaces between my heartbeat. I can't, I gasped, stumbling backward. It's inside. The windless night carried the truth back in a perfect whisper. Inside, the glow from the tomb surged in the distance, casting our shadows long across the dune. But Collins wasn't looking at the light, he was looking at me, his terror sharpening into something colder. Decision. We can't let it take you back, he said, voice cracking. If it gets you inside that tomb, if it anchors itself in you. He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The breath inside me deepened, expanding my lungs with a slow, deliberate pull. My vision blurred at the edges. Every whisper from the tomb vibrated through my bones. Return. Complete. Open. Collins grabbed my shoulders. Fight it. Look at me. Look at me. For a moment, his voice cut through the static. The world steadied. The thing inside me hesitated. Then, a gentle talk tapped from just behind my ear. Not outside. Not beneath the sand. From inside my skull. I froze. Collins saw my expression and staggered back. No, he breathed. It's marked you. The knocks continued. Faint, but unmistakable. Talk, talk, talk. Counting down. The ground trembled. The glow surged higher, licking the horizon. The whispers crescendoed. Come home. My legs buckled. I dropped to my knees. Collins shouted my name distant, muffled. I felt his hand reaching for me, but something inside me reached back, pushing his touch away with a force that wasn't mine. He fell backward, eyes wide with horror. Run. I choked out. Please run. But he didn't move. He stared at me, not in fear, but recognition, because the voice that answered him, the one speaking through my throat, was not mine. We are not finished with you either. A final knock echoed behind my eyes. Talk. And the breath inside me inhaled sharply, preparing to speak again, preparing to open something, preparing to continue story 2. The drifting vessel with no crew. I first saw the vessel at dawn, when the sea was too still and the horizon too pale to trust. The water lay flat as polished glass, undisturbed by wind or wave. Yet the ship drifted toward us with the patience of something that had been traveling a very long time. No flag, no lanterns, no signs of recent sails or crew. Just a long, dark hull gliding silently across the mirror-smooth surface. Its wood swollen with age but unbroken, as though time itself had been cautious not to offend it. I leaned over the side of our small research boat, listening. The ocean always had a voice wave slapping hulls, ropes creaking, seabirds calling, but now, nothing. The only sound was a faint, rhythmic scrape coming from the empty vessel, like rope sliding slowly across timber. Scrr, scrr, scrr. A sound with no wind to cause it, no hands to guide it. Then, from somewhere deep inside the hull, a second sound rose. Footsteps, measured, unhurried, walking the deck of a ship that had no crew. I lifted my head to call the others, and the footsteps stopped, only to whisper back, in a voice carried by no breeze. You finally found us. The others were slow to wake, groggy from a night of drifting over calm water, unaware of what had approached us while we slept. When they finally emerged onto the deck, rubbing their eyes against the early light, the vessel was already less than 30 meters away. It should have collided with us. It should have made a sound, any sound cutting through the water. But it glided as if the sea parted for it. Alden whistled under his breath. No crew. No rigs. How's it even moving? No one answered. Because the longer we stared, the more we realized the ship didn't move toward us. The sea beneath it moved under it, sweeping it forward like an unseen current trapped solely beneath its hull. I leaned closer to the rail. Listen. The others fell silent. Nothing. Not a wave splash. Not a rope creak. Not a gull. Until, scrur, scrur, scrur. The same gentle scrape I'd heard earlier. A dragging sound. Almost tender, as if something inside were testing its weight against the boards. Alden frowned. Loose rigging. There are no sails. Maren said quietly. Then another sound rose, so faint we almost mistook it for our own imagination. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, repeating with impossible steadiness along the empty deck. Talk, 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 talk. A rhythm too precise for weathered old timber, too measured for accident. Each step landed where a human foot should fall, yet the deck remained empty. Marin's hand flew to her mouth. Is someone alive in there? Alden shook his head. If there were survivors, they'd signal, they'd shout, something. But the footsteps continued, walking from stern to bow, then stopping exactly at the point closest to our boat, as though whoever or whatever was pacing had noticed us. The silence that followed pressed like weight against my ears. The sea didn't breathe. The sky didn't stir. Then came a new noise, a single tap, against wood, sharp, intentional. Tok. Alden startled. Someone knocked, but I shook my head, throat tightening. Not someone, because the knock hadn't come from the ship. It had come from beneath our feet, from inside our own hull. We all froze. The knock came again, lighter this time, almost polite. Tok, Marin whispered. That's impossible. My pulse hammered. I knelt, pressing my palm to the deck. The wood was cool, undisturbed, yet a faint vibration thrummed through it, as though a signal were pulsing upward, syncing with our heartbeat. Alden backed toward the cabin. We radio it in. We're not approaching until... He stopped mid-sentence. A rope on the abandoned vessel shifted, coiling upward despite the still air, its frayed end lifting as though grasped by an unseen hand. Then it stretched outward across the gap between our boats, reaching, not toward Alden, not toward Marin, toward me. The footsteps resumed, now directly in front of where I stood, invisible, steady, purposeful, and from the empty deck came a whisper, barely louder than breath. Come aboard. We've been waiting for your steps. The rope hung between our two vessels like an invitation, or a warning. Alden swore under his breath and stumbled back from the rail, nearly tripping over the coiled rigging at his feet. Marin didn't move at all. She stood frozen, eyes fixed on the rope as though she were watching a limb of something alive stretching across the gap. The water remained impossibly still. No ripple, no current, no breeze. Yet the rope drifted toward me with a slow, unmistakable pull, its frayed end brushing the air like fingers searching for skin. I stepped back. The footsteps on the abandoned deck matched me instantly, mirroring my retreat. Tok, tok, tok. 3 slow paces. Then they stopped. My breath itched. It's copying me. Marin finally found her voice. Copying, or following. Before either of us could answer, the sound changed. From deep inside the vessel came a low groan, the groan of ancient timbers shifting, heavy and sodden with seawater. But it didn't sound like the hull settling. It sounded like something inside was pushing against the ribs of the ship, stretching them outward as though the vessel were breathing. The boards swelled, then contracted. A slow, deliberate inhale, a longer exhale. No, Alden whispered. No, that's not possible. But we all felt it. The sea moved beneath the ship, not around it, water rising and falling with the rhythm of its breath. And then the footsteps resumed, faster now. Tok, 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 tok. They raced along the deck, darting from bow to stern, down the starboard side, then back again. Each impact struck with precise weight, too heavy for a bird, too light for cargo, too rhythmic for weather. Alden scrambled into the cabin. "I'm calling this in. I'm calling." The radio crackled violently, shrieking with static. We jerked back from the noise. Through the static, a faint voice bled in. "Don't board, don't board." Marin's breath caught. A distress call, but the voice shifted, glitching in tone, until it sounded like me. "Don't board." My chest tightened. "Alden, turn it off." He slapped the radio. The device sparked, then went dead. Silence swallowed the boat again, except for one sound. A soft brushing from our port side. Something dragging along our hull. Slow. Scraping. Climbing. Skr. Skr. Marin leaned over the rail, voice trembling. "Is something in the water?" "No," I said, because I could hear it clearly now. The scrape wasn't coming from the water. It was coming from the inside of our hull, something crawling upward from below deck. Alden re-emerged from the cabin, pale. "We need to start the engine." Now. He didn't get the chance. A thunderous crack echoed across the sea. The abandoned vessel's mast rotted through, yet impossibly intact, snapped upright, like a spine clicking into place. Ropes that should have been stiff with salt water lifted and uncoiled, rising through the dead air as though pulled by invisible hands. Then came the footsteps again, this time not pacing, approaching. Talk, 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 talk. The final step landed exactly at the point where the rope met our railing. The rope tightened, pulled taut, and our boat lurched. The abandoned vessel was drawing us in. Alden grabbed the wheel instinctively, though the engine was still dead. Cut the rope, but before he could reach it, the footsteps resumed, not on the deck, but along the rope itself. Each impact shivered the line. Talk, 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 talk. The sound traveled toward us, like something walking upside down across the hanging rope, drawing closer with impossible precision. Marin screamed. I stumbled backward. The final step landed on our side of the rope, and then knock against the rail, right beside my hand. A soft, patient tap, as though confirming my exact position. I yanked my hand away. The knock came again. Toke, this time lower, deeper, resonating through the entire boat. Our hull shuddered. The deck vibrated beneath our feet. The sea, so still before, began to tremble in a tight, circular pattern around us, as though the water itself were reacting to the rhythm. Alden's voice cracked. "It's trying to get on board. Whatever it is." "No," I whispered, cold spreading down my spine. "It's not trying." Because the footsteps behind us, on our own deck, had already begun. Slow, measured, heavy, exactly matching the cadence of the footsteps approaching us on the other ship minutes before. But now, they were coming from the stern, moving toward us. Toke, toke, toke. The three of us turned at once. There was nothing there. Nothing visible, but the sound continued, closer with each step. Toke, toke. Alden choked out a wordless cry, because the final step didn't land on the deck. It landed directly behind me, right where a presence unseen, heavy, breathing softly now stood, and the whisper that followed was warm enough to brush the back of my neck. "Your steps fit ours perfectly." I spun around so fast I nearly toppled over the rail. Nothing. Just the empty deck, the pale morning light, and the steady heave of my own breath, except the breath behind me didn't stop when mine did. It lingered, warm, measured, close enough to fog the air against my neck, though no shape cast a shadow. Alden grabbed my arm, pulling me back. We're going below. Now. We need cover. But the footsteps answered him before I could. Talk, talk, talk. Descending the stairs into the cabin, except none of us had moved yet. Marin's face drained of color. It's already inside. Alden pushed us toward the hatch, more instinct than strategy. But the moment our hands touched the handle, a loud, resonant knock boomed from underneath it. Tuck. We froze. A second knock, louder, impatient. Toke. Then a third, but the third didn't come from below. It came from directly behind Marin. She screamed and jumped away, stumbling into me. Alden shoved the hatch closed just as something struck it from below with enough force to rattle the hinges. Thud. The entire boat shivered. Then the footsteps below deck started moving fast, now running the length of the hull. Talk, 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 talk. They sprinted from bow to stern with inhuman speed, doubling back, circling, pacing beneath us like a predator testing the boards for weak points. Alden backed toward the wheel. Engine. We needed running. Now, before he could reach it, the abandoned vessel groaned again. Its deck planks rose and fell in slow waves, bulging upward as though something inside crawled beneath them. The mast twisted unnaturally, ropes coiling like tendons tightening around bone. The ropes still connecting our boats snapped taut. A single tug pulled us several meters closer. No, cut the line, Alden shouted. But the knife was below deck. With the thing, Marin pointed to the rail-mounted emergency axe. Use that. Alden leapt for it. He never reached it. The air around him pulsed, a burst of pressure like sound without sound, and Alden staggered backward. His foot caught on a cleat. He hit the deck hard, gasping, clutching at his throat. Marin fell to her knees beside him. Alden, what's wrong? What happened? His mouth opened. No voice came out, just a soft, rhythmic clicking, almost like. I leaned closer. Footsteps, tiny ones, inside his chest. Talk, talk, talk. Alden convulsed, eyes rolling. Marin screamed his name. I didn't get to help him, because the footsteps from both ships suddenly synchronized ours above deck. Theirs above and below, and the water trembled violently, as though responding to the joined rhythm. The abandoned vessel's hull split open with a crack like a tree ripping down its center. The glow inside its hold pulsed through the fissures, expanding. The ship's ribs stretched outward, widening like the jaw of a great beast preparing to swallow us. A voice rose from its depths, not whispered, not distant, calling, "Come aboard." Alden's body jerked upright as if pulled by strings. His limbs straightened, his spine cracked loudly, and then, impossibly, he stood, though his eyes remained glassy and unseeing. Marin sobbed, grabbing his arm. Alden, please." But he didn't look at her. He stepped toward the rail. One step, two. Each footfall hit the deck with that same unnatural rhythm. Talk, talk. No. I lunged for him. Before my fingers touched his sleeve, something invisible shoved me backward with brute force. I slammed into the cabin wall, air blasting from my lungs. Pain scattered across my ribs. Alden reached the edge. He lifted one leg over the rail and paused. Not on his own, but because someone or something standing between our two boats paused at the same time. A shadow flickered briefly across the water. Not a human shadow. Too tall, too thin. Its outline shivered like a reflection on disturbed glass. Then it lifted its foot. Alden lifted his. It took a step. Alden took a step. Onto the rope. Marin grabbed him desperately, but the rope twisted, tightening around his foot like a snare. The footsteps across the rope resumed. Talk, talk, talk. Each step dragged Alden closer to the abandoned vessel. His body didn't struggle. His face didn't change. He had already become part of the rhythm. I crawled toward them despite the fire in my ribs, the air shuddering with each beat from both decks. Marin reached again, but Alden turned his head toward us for the first time, and he smiled. Not with his mouth, with the sound inside his chest. The footsteps spoke. One more step. Alden took it. Halfway across, another tremor shook both ships. The abandoned vessel's glow flared violently, illuminating Alden's silhouette as he crossed on legs that no longer belonged to him. Only one thing stopped him from reaching the other side, and it wasn't us. It was the voice that rose suddenly from the water beneath him. Not him. You. And every plank on both ships vibrated in agreement. The unseen thing on the rope froze, then turned toward me. The rope slackened, then snapped. Alden fell, not into the sea, but into the opening hull of the waiting ship, swallowed in a flash of white. The rope recoiled toward me like a striking serpent, and the footsteps resumed, running toward me now. For a moment, everything collapsed into noise. Screams, splitting timber, the hiss of seawater rushing into cracks. Then, just as suddenly, the world stilled. Not quiet, stilled, the way a held breath stills a body. Marin clutched the rail, staring at the widening gap between the two ships. Alden's gone. Oh God, he's gone. But even she didn't dare say dead. Not after what we'd heard in his chest. The abandoned vessel drifted back, as if satisfied, pulling away with the same unnatural grace with which it had approached. The glow beneath its hull dimmed, shrinking back into the fissures. The boards eased into place. The ropes slackened. Even the mast bowed back into its previous posture, as though nothing had happened at all. Alden's disappearance had quieted it. For now, Marin backed away until she hit the cabin wall. Her breath hitched in sharp, panicked bursts. We have to turn around. We have to get out of here. My ribs throbbed with each breath, but I managed a nod. Engine first. I limped toward the stern, half expecting another unseen force to shove me into the sea. But nothing touched me. Not even the warmth I'd felt before. It was as though whatever had animated the ship had retreated entirely. The air was empty, almost harmless. I tried the ignition. The engine coughed twice and roared to life, smooth and steady, the way it always had. The sound washed over me like a blessing, a return to the normal world, a human world, a breathing machine replacing the oppressive silence. Marin let out something between a sob and a laugh. We're okay. We're okay. We can move. The abandoned vessel floated a good distance away now, drifting back into the fog that had begun to roll across the water. No glow. No footsteps. No rope reaching for us, just a silhouette swallowed by gray. I eased the throttle forward. The hull vibrated gently beneath us, this time with the familiar hum of machinery instead of the echo of alien footsteps. For several long minutes, neither of us spoke. Marin finally broke the silence. It stopped following. I swallowed. Maybe it wanted something specific. She flinched. You mean Alden? I didn't answer, because I didn't believe that either. Something about the way the footsteps had paused on the rope before turning toward me still burned behind my ribs. Something about the voice in the water, the one that had said not him, you. Something about the rope snapping, not cut, not frayed snapped like old sinew under tension. But I couldn't tell her any of that. Let her have calm, even if it was a lie. The fog thickened as we moved. Our boat cut through the water with smooth, steady progress. No more tremors, no more knocks, only the sound of the engine and the soft lap of water against the hull. Normal, almost. Then the radio crackled. Marin jumped. No, not again. But this time it wasn't static. It was a voice. Clear, calm. Any vessels within range? Respond. There are reports of an abandoned ship drifting in this sector. Repeat. There are. I snatched up the radio. This is research vessel Oriole. We've encountered it. We need immediate assistance. We have... I hesitated. How did I describe what we had? A missing crew member. I finished. The radio hissed softly. Then came the reply. Copy that. Oriole, are you still in proximity? I glanced at the fog. No visual, but it's close. Another pause. Then, stay on your current heading. Do not attempt to board or approach the vessel. A humorless laugh escaped me. We won't. Good. We'll reach your location within. The transmission cut out with a violent burst of static. A sound whispered through the crackling. Soft. Rhythmic. Unmistakable. Footsteps. Toke, toke, toke. Marin's face drained of color. It's the same sound. It's... The footsteps stopped. A new voice replaced them. Alden's. Weak. Freddy. But definitely his. We're coming. Don't leave. Marin covered her mouth with both hands. It's him. It's him. No. I whispered. It's not. But the voice continued. Clearer now. Almost pleading. Don't go. Please, don't go. Then, layered beneath Alden's voice, another one spoke. Not human. Not trying to be. You left one behind. A chill swept through the boat so sharply I felt my bones tighten. Marin's eyes widened. She backed away from me as though seeing something she hadn't noticed before. No, she whispered. Not you. Not again. I frowned. What? And then I felt it. A soft, gentle vibration beneath my feet. A faint, familiar tapping. Toke. Once. Inside the hull. Directly below where I stood. The same rhythm that had called to Alden. The same rhythm that had climbed the rope. The same rhythm that had whispered you across the water. It had not followed Alden. It had followed us. It had followed me. But this time, it wasn't rushing. It wasn't pressuring. It wasn't demanding. It was waiting. Patient. Calm. Confident. like something that knew the door was already open. The knock beneath my feet didn't repeat immediately. It echoed once soft, assured, and then settled into silence so complete it made the engine's steady hum feel fragile, like it could be swallowed at any moment. Marin backed toward the bow, never taking her eyes off me. "Tell me you don't hear it," she whispered, but I couldn't lie. I felt the vibration rising through the planks, subtle as a second heartbeat, not painful, not threatening, patient. I stepped back instinctively, but the vibration followed, moving with me, not beneath the hull as a whole, but tracking my position like a predator's shadow. "Marin," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Stay calm. We're almost out of range. Once the rescue team arrives." She cut me off with a shaking head. "It doesn't need the ship. It doesn't need the water. It's after you." The fog thickened around us, rolling in swollen waves that blurred the horizon. The abandoned vessel was a faint silhouette in the distance now, barely visible. Yet the more it disappeared into the mist, the stronger the presence beneath our hull felt, as though distance only sharpened its focus. The radio crackled again. A different voice this time, older, strained, urgent. "Oriole, if you hear this, do not stop. Don't slow. Don't answer. It mimics the living. It follows the last voice it hears." Static swallowed the rest, but one phrase lingered long enough to freeze my blood. "Don't let it speak through you." The knock came again, not from below, from inside the wall beside me. "Talk." The wooden panel trembled, dust drifting from its seams. Marin screamed. "It's in the hull. It's in the hull." I stumbled back toward the wheel and pushed the throttle farther. The bow lifted slightly as the engine strained, the wakes foaming behind us. But the fog didn't break. It only pressed tighter around us, forming a cocoon of pale gray. "Talk." A knock behind my left shoulder, too high to be inside the hull. "Toke." Another on my right. Then, tap, 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 tap. Light footsteps crossing the deck behind us. Marin looked at me with eyes full of tears. "We have to shut it out. Stop listening." That's what the message meant. It can't take you unless you let it speak through you. But the footsteps were already circling us, invisible feet marking a careful, curious pattern. The deck vibrated with each step. It wasn't random. It was studying us, mapping us. Then the footsteps stopped, right behind me. I didn't turn, couldn't. The breath touched my ear again, warm, damp, deliberate. "Your voice, Fitz." Marin grabbed my arm and yanked me away from the wheel. "Move." But the moment she touched me, "Talk." A violent knock struck the deck between us, so hard it splintered the wood. We fell on opposite sides of the crack, scrambling backward as a thin fracture split along the grain like a spreading wound. From inside the split, a sliver of pale glow leaked upward. Not light. Reflection, like the surface of deep water. Marin, get away from the boards. But the crack widened before either of us could move, the deck bowing inward as though something beneath it pushed upward with infinite patience. The footsteps resumed, this time amplified, as though dozens of feet paced inside the hull. The wood flexed under the pressure. "Talk, talk, talk, talk." Marin crawled toward me, voice shaking. "We have to get off this deck into the cabin now." We lurched toward the hatch, but a sudden lurch of the boat threw us both off balance. The engine sputtered, not dying, but choking on something deeper than mechanical failure. And then, Everything stopped. The engine froze mid-hum. The water fell silent. Even the air stopped moving. The world held its breath. Then a voice rose through the crack in the deck. A chorus of layered whispers speaking in one unified shape. Last voice. Last steps. Last door. The glow surged upward, flooding through the widening crack. When it touched the air, the fog around us shifted, pulled inward, condensing, forming something like a shape made of smoke and reflection. Tall, thin, swaying gently, like it floated in unseen water. It leaned toward me. Marin threw herself between us. Take me then. Leave him. The figure swayed once, an almost thoughtful motion, then it spoke through the fog with a depth that rattled the air. Not your steps. Its arm lengthened, stretching like mist held by a current reaching over her shoulder toward me. Marin screamed. I did the only thing my body would let me do. I screamed back. Not words, just sound. Raw and human. The fog figure recoiled, its form rippling like disturbed water. The glow flickered. The footsteps faltered. It didn't expect me to fight, but the scream had a cost. Because the moment I gave voice, the chamber answered. From the radio, from the hull, from the fog itself, my own scream replayed back to me. Deeper, older, stretched into a shape I did not recognize. And the voice that came after was unmistakably mine. We accept. The fog figure surged forward. Marin grabbed my wrist. Jump. I didn't think. I followed her weight as she lunged over the rail. The sea swallowed us whole, cold and merciful. The boat receded above us, the fog swirling violently around the silhouette of the thing on the deck. And then, through the muffled world beneath the water, through the thrum of my hammering heart, I heard footsteps, walking on the surface of the sea, walking toward us. Cold swallowed every sound as we plunged beneath the surface. But the footsteps above didn't fade. They sharpened. Each impact cracked through the water like a heartbeat. Talk, talk, talk. Impossible. Footsteps on the open sea. Marin surfaced first, gasping. I followed, sputtering salt and panic. The fog above us churned, funneling into a narrow column over our boat, as if something immense leaned down to peer into the water. Our vessel drifted away, slow and lifeless, the engine dead. The deck remained empty, and yet the footsteps still paced from bow to stern. Talk, talk, talk. Then they stopped, right at the rail. Marin grabbed my arm. Swim. Now. Don't look back. We thrashed toward the faint shimmer of clearer water, pushing through the icy weight pulling at our limbs. The fog wall receded behind us, but a shape began to form within it tall, thin, swaying like something studying its reflection in the sea. Then a voice drifted over the water. You left your steps behind, Marin sobbed. Don't listen. Keep going, just keep. The water beneath me warmed suddenly. Not comforting warm, breathing warm. A pulse, then another. Inside the water, and inside my chest. I froze. Marin. She turned, terrified. No, not again, keep moving. But I couldn't, because the warmth inside me rose like a second lung, expanding, and the sea around my body rippled in perfect synchrony with my breath, as though the water itself were exhaling through me. Then a knock vibrated through the ocean floor beneath our feet. Toke. Deep. Resonant. Ancient. The fog thickened behind us. The silhouette leaned closer. Its voice thinned into a whisper. "You don't need the ship. You never did." Water surged upward around my arms, curling like grasping fingers. Marin reached for me, screaming my name, her voice cracking the fog like a flare. But the sea held me fast, warm and rhythmic. Then, from beneath the waves, from a depth no human voice could reach, came a perfect imitation of my whisper. "Marin, let go." Her eyes widened with horror. "That's not you." But the warm pulse inside me answered her. "Not yet." And the water began to pull me under. Story 3. The wartime passage beneath the chapel. I first heard the footsteps the night the chapel bells refused to ring. The old building sat alone at the edge of the ravine, a relic from the war, its walls pitted by shrapnel, its stained glass windows darkened by smoke and age. I had been sent to catalog the ruins before the restoration crews arrived. A quiet assignment, simple enough: photograph, record, preserve. But when I stepped inside, the air felt wrong, thick, listening. My torchlight swept across splintered pews and cracked marble, until it landed on a trapdoor near the altar, half-rotted, rimmed with rust, held shut by a chain that looked far newer than the chapel around it. That was when I heard it. A single footstep, from beneath the floorboards, slow, dragging, as if someone were walking through mud deep underground. Scrape, step, scrape. I froze, heart thudding in my throat. The chapel around me held its breath. Then came a second footstep, closer, a little heavier, not echoing, not reverberating. Approaching, I backed away from the trapdoor, pulse hammering, when a whisper rose from the darkness below, quiet, tired, shaped like someone who had been calling for years. "I hear you up there." For a long moment, I could only stare at the trapdoor, waiting, hoping for silence to settle back into the chapel. It didn't. The whisper lingered under the floorboards, like a breath caught in old timber. Not threatening, not pleading, just aware. My torch flickered as I stepped back, casting uneven shadows that clung to the rafters like smoke. The chapel had always been quiet. In the records, no choir, no congregation, abandoned decades ago. Yet the air now carried a faint vibration beneath my boots, a tremor so subtle it felt almost like the building was remembering something. Another step echoed from below. Scrape, step. This one was slower, a dragging motion, heel first, as though the person, if it was a person, had been walking for too long on legs that no longer obeyed. I whispered before thinking, "Who's down there?" My voice bounced weakly against the ruined stone. Then, beneath me, the answer returned. Not echoing, not mimicking. "You can open it, if you like." A prickle crawled up the back of my neck. I moved closer despite myself. The chain securing the trapdoor was polished in places, too clean for something untouched since wartime. Someone had handled it recently, or many times. Kneeling, I brushed dust from the planks. The wood felt warmer than it should in such an empty place. And then, a faint tapping rose beneath my palm. Talk, talk, as gentle as knuckles tapping on a door, matching the exact place where my hand rested. I jerked back. The tapping stopped instantly. The chapel fell silent again, except for the soft hiss of wind slipping through broken glass. Outside, twilight had deepened faster than I remembered. long shadows spilling across the pews, stretching toward the trapdoor as though drawn to it. I forced myself to stand. Stay logical, I told myself. It's a wartime passage. Someone could be trapped. A vagrant. A survivor of the tunnels. Someone who needs help. But the voice below did not sound panicked, or weak, or hungry. It sounded patient, like someone who had waited through entire seasons of darkness and wanted me to know that my arrival was not a surprise. I circled the chapel, checking the windows, tugging the front doors, anything to distract myself from the weight of the steps below. The air thickened as I moved, each breath mixing dust with something faintly metallic like old blood long scrubbed from stone. When I reached the altar again, the floor vibrated under my feet. A third step, heavier, closer to the trapdoor, closer to me. Scrape step, then a whisper, barely audible, rising from directly beneath the altar stones. Don't leave me alone again. A shiver crawled through me. Again. Before I could ask what that meant, the trapdoor chain rattled softly, as though fingers from below brushed against it. The chapel lights dimmed, the air tightened, and from beneath the planks came one more sound. A slow, deliberate, knocked talk. Exactly beneath where I stood. The knock lingered in the wood, vibrating faintly through the soles of my boots. Not loud, just deliberate. A knock meant for me. Outside, wind scraped across the chapel roof in thin, useless breaths. But inside, the air grew heavier, as though the building itself were listening, holding its ancient lungs still so nothing would drown out the sounds below. I took one slow step back. The floorboard beneath me creaked. The knock answered instantly. Tok. Directly beneath my new position. My throat tightened. Stop, please. The chapel swallowed my words. Then the voice below rose, again quieter this time, like someone pressing their mouth to the underside of the floorboards. I can follow, if you need. A dragging step scraped beneath the altar. Scrape, step, scrape. The sound traveled from one beam to the next, tracing my path across the chapel. Wherever I moved, the footsteps adjusted, keeping pace with a slow, steady determination. Not hunting, not rushing, shadowing. The kind of movement a tired soldier might make while learning to walk again. I backed toward the far wall, heart hammering. Dust rattled from a cracked beam overhead as the chapel groaned. Old timbers shifting like stiff joints, waking after years of disuse. The footsteps below quickened slightly. Scrape step, as though whoever or whatever was gaining confidence. I pressed my hand against the stone, grounding myself. Who are you? The answer came after a long, aching pause. The one who stayed? A chill dragged up my spine. The wartime records had mentioned soldiers hiding in the chapel tunnel's messengers. Medics. Refugees, but none had ever been found down there. The entrances collapsed decades ago. The last known survivor had been rescued 2 weeks after the siege ended. 2 weeks. Long enough for someone to die. Long enough for someone to be forgotten. Scrape. The sound beneath my feet deepened. Louder. More certain. Then, thump. Not a step. A fall. Something heavy had dropped to one knee beneath the chapel, as if trying to brace itself. Dust sifted from the floorboards, drifting downward through thin cracks. I crouched, staring through a gap wider than the rest. Movement. A faint shimmer of pale skin or something bone pale shifted in the dark below. Not the full shape of a body, just the blur of something angled awkwardly, as if a limb had been bent for too long. My breath caught. Marin's words from the previous story echoed in my ears. But that wasn't here. That wasn't now. I forced myself to focus. The thing below whispered again. Voice, trembling with a strange mix of exhaustion and certainty. Don't go. Not yet. The chapel door behind me slammed shut. I spun. No wind. No draft. The old brass handle turned once. Slowly, as if tested by an unseen hand. Then stopped. A chill spread through the air, sinking into the stone. Under the floorboards, the dragging grew stronger. Scrap, step, scrap, step. The entire tunnel seemed to shift beneath the chapel, as if old earth and stone were rearranging themselves to bring the figure closer. Boards rattled. A distant beam cracked. The ground trembled in tiny pulses that mirrored the rhythm of approaching steps. I stumbled back toward the altar, but the chain on the trapdoor rattled violently, the padlock clinking. Something below was pulling. The chain tightened. The padlock groaned. Once, twice. Then the voice rose again, louder this time, speaking with the strain of someone forcing a long closed door. Let me see the world again. The chain snapped. The trapdoor lurched upward an inch. Not enough to open fully, but enough to exhale a wave of old, stale air that reeked of soil, rusted metal, and something else. Salt? No. Tears. And beneath that scent was another layer. A sound. A faint chorus of footsteps deeper in the tunnel. Not just one set. Many. Pacing. Shuffling. Waiting. The one beneath me wasn't alone. The voice beside the trapdoor spoke again, no longer tired. Eager. We've all been waiting. The floor shuddered so violently I staggered back, gripping a broken pew for balance. The trapdoor jumped another inch. Boards cracked. And then, clear as a bell, a final knock rose from the tunnel. Talk. A soldier's signal. A call to open. The trapdoor jumped a third time, not lifted by hands, but by sheer insistence, as though the weight beneath it had shifted upward and upward until the wood had no choice but to yield. The chain already snapped slid across the floor like a slithering metal tongue. I pressed my back against the nearest pew, heart stuttering against my ribs. Stay closed. Stay closed. But the chapel seemed to ignore me. Ancient timbers creaked overhead. Dust drifted in slow spirals. The air thickened with the warmth of something breathing from below hotter, wetter than before, like an exhale forced through clenched teeth. Another step echoed under the floorboards. Scrape, step. This time the footfall landed directly beneath the altar, shifting the stone slab with a hollow groan. Cracks crawled along its edges like thin, pale fingers reaching outward. No, I whispered. Don't come up here. Please. A soft whisper rose from the seams of the trapdoor, as though lips were pressed inches beneath the wood. I'm trying. The trapdoor twitched. Once, twice, then lifted only by a breath's width, but enough for darkness to slide out like a spill of liquid shadow. It pooled at the edges, shivering as though tasting the open air for the first time in decades. I stumbled backward, knocking over the pew. The crash echoed through the chapel, and immediately, the tunnel below echoed it back, not as a reflection, as a chorus. Dozens of voices repeated the thud in a staggered rhythm, slow, mismatched, like a long line of soldiers striking the ground at uneven intervals. Then, scrape, step, scrape, step, scrape, step. One pair of footsteps rising, many more waiting. The trapdoor rose half an inch, a pale shape pressed against the gap. Not fingers, not a hand, a knuckle, raw and bone pale, dragging itself upward, scraping faintly against the underside of the wood. The skin stretched too thin, as though whatever was beneath didn't remember how many joints a human finger should have. I staggered behind the altar. It hid nothing, but some instinct made me crouch low, as though breaking line of sight might help. The voice spoke again. Not beneath my feet this time. Behind me, at ear level. Don't hide from me. I jerked around and saw no one. Just the long nave, the cracked windows, and shadows stretched thin across the pews like bodies lying in rows. The footsteps below grew faster, stronger. The floorboards bowed upward with each step, as though the figure beneath had begun to climb a staircase only it could see. I pressed myself against the altar stone. My breathing turned shallow. My fingers shook. "You're not supposed to be here," I whispered, realizing too late how foolish the statement was. The voice, now everywhere and nowhere, answered, "This is the only place I've ever been." The trapdoor jerked upward another inch, and this time I saw an eye. Not fully, just the edge of one, a glimpse of a pupil too large, swallowing the whites, set in a sunken socket dusted with old dirt. The eye didn't blink. It fixed on me immediately, sharpening with recognition. A shudder ripped through the chapel, rattling broken glass. Then, from deeper in the tunnel far beyond the first figure came another sound. Footsteps. Many. Marching. Slow but coordinated. A unit. A platoon. Each step landing in heavy, deadened rhythm. Thud, thud, thud. They matched the knock pattern from before. A wartime signal. A call to advance. No, no. Stay down there, I begged. But the first figure didn't listen. It pushed harder. The trapdoor rose another few inches, enough for a forearm, colorless and gaunt, to force its way through. The limb trembled violently. Not from weakness, but from effort, bones cracking, joints popping, as though reshaping themselves to fit a space they no longer belonged to. The chapel groaned. The rafters shook. The air filled with the sound of scraping boots rising from below. The first figure arm extended, pressed its hand against the stone floor. It wasn't reaching for me. It was testing its weight on the surface. Preparing to stand, I bolted for the door. My hand closed around the brass handle. It didn't budge. The voice rose behind me, soft, almost soothing. "You can open doors." I remember that. I spun, breath sharp. "You knew me," I whispered. The figure paused mid-lift, its arm dangling from the trapdoor like a forgotten marionette limb. Its voice softened. "I knew. Someone like you." Behind it, the marching footsteps approached the base of the ladder in unison. Thud, 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 thud. My heart hammered so violently it drowned out thought. The trapdoor hinges strained. The wood cracked. The first figure's head began to rise into view. Hair matted with soil. Jaw slack. Eyes fixed on me as though I were the final memory anchoring it to the world above. And then, quietly, intimately, "Don't make me climb alone." The trapdoor split. A flood of footsteps followed. The trapdoor burst fully upward with a splintering crack, sending fragments of old wood skittering across the chapel floor. I stumbled backward, shielding my face from the debris. For a single horrifying instant, I expected a tide of bodies to spill out, arms grasping, boots scraping, jaws unhinged. But nothing emerged. The opening gaped wide and dark, exhaling a long breath of stale, cold air into the chapel. The first figure's arm hung motionless over the edge, limp as wet cloth, its pale fingers grazing the stone. No head, no body, no movement. Silence returned, heavy, total, the kind you feel pressing against your skull. I waited, and waited. Nothing. A tremor of hope flickered through my chest, trembling and fragile. Maybe, I whispered. Maybe they collapsed. Maybe they stopped. My voice echoed faintly through the emptiness. The trapdoor remained still. The tunnels below gave no reply. I crept closer, each step careful, ready to bolt if even a shadow twitched. My heartbeat sounded too loud in the quiet, the chapel's emptiness turning it into an almost guilty throb. When I reached the opening, I crouched and peered inside. The darkness swallowed my torch beam for a moment, then slowly revealed the uppermost rung of an iron ladder, rusted and twisted. Below it, nothing. No figures. No movement. The air rising from the passage felt colder, calmer, as though whatever had been struggling upward moments ago had dissolved back into the dark. The arm on the floor remained slack, unmoving. My first instinct was absurd. Should I push it back down? I reached out, hesitating mere centimeters away, and the limb twitched, just once. A tiny, involuntary spasm, like a dying nerve. I leapt back so quickly I nearly tripped over a pew. My breath caught in my throat, sweat prickling across my spine. But the arm stayed still after that single tremor. A moment later, dust drifted softly from the rafters, a harmless shiver of the old chapel settling. Nothing more. The oppressive pressure that had thickened the air earlier had faded. The room felt lighter, almost gentler, as if the entire building were relieved the struggle had ended. False calm washed over me like warm water. I backed away from the trapdoor. It's okay, I told myself aloud. They weren't coming out. They weren't strong enough. The tunnel, it must have collapsed again. The noise earlier, yes, that was it. Saying it made it almost believable. I checked the windows, still broken, but the evening light had softened into a muted gold, painting the dust with a peaceful glow. Outside, even the wind seemed to return to its natural cadence, brushing softly against the ruined chapel like a familiar hand settling on a shoulder. The sense of watching, of being followed, was gone. For the first time since the footsteps began, I could breathe. I returned to the altar, kneeling beside the broken trapdoor. With cautious fingers, I nudged the pale forearm. It shifted easily, pliant and light, far too light to belong to a whole body. A mannequin limb, a prosthetic, something left behind from wartime medical practice. The thought steadied me, made everything mundane again. I exhaled shakily and sat back on my heels. The chapel smelled of dust and old stone and nothing else. The weight of unseen eyes had vanished. The oppressive warmth had cooled. Relief, real, solid relief, finally seeped into my bones. I stood, brushing dirt from my trousers. "All right," I murmured, forcing a tired smile. I'll report the collapse, seal the opening, and that's... My words stopped. A faint sound drifted up from the trapdoor. Not a voice, not a footstep, a sigh. Soft, exhausted, almost disappointed. I leaned forward slowly. Hello? Silence. I lowered myself until my head hovered just above the opening, listening hard. Nothing. Relief surged again, until I noticed something odd. The chapel's air felt warmer, barely just enough to stir the hairs on my arms. Warm, as though someone were standing very close behind me. Before I could turn, a whisper rose not from below the trapdoor, but from the pew directly behind my shoulder. You closed the wrong door. I froze. The whisper behind me was too close, warm breath brushing the back of my neck, raising every hair along my spine. I turned slowly, terrified of what shape I might find crouched in the pew's shadows. But the pew was empty. Just rotting wood, dust, and shafts of evening light falling in gentle angles through cracked stained glass. Empty. Yet the warmth lingered, as if someone had just leaned forward and spoken into my ear a heartbeat ago. I backed away, pulse pounding in my throat. The wrong door? I whispered, scanning the chapel. The trap door stood open behind me, dark and motionless. The pews were dead still. The altar was a monolith of cracked stone. Nothing stirred, but the air shifted again, soft currents moving where no breeze should be, brushing my sleeves, circling my legs, curling around my throat like unseen fingers, testing the shape of my pulse. A gentle knock echoed from somewhere in the nave. Talk. Not from the trapdoor. From behind the pews, deeper in the shadows. Talk. Another. Closer. As if something walked between the rows, tracing the path of a congregation long gone. I retreated toward the chapel doors, but the old brass handles refused to turn. The metal warm under my palms, warmer than any metal left in a cold stone ruin had a right to be. Toke. A third knock, this one behind the altar. I spun. The pale arms still lay limp on the floorboards beside the trapdoor. But now, the fingers curled inward, slowly, deliberately, as if regaining sensation. No, I breathed. No, you're gone. You were gone. The fingers twitched again, then extended, reaching. A scraping shuffle followed from beneath the altar, one I recognized instantly. The dragging step, the weight shifting, someone rising slowly after kneeling too long. Scrape step, and from the pews came another step, mismatched but deliberate. Toke. Two sets of footsteps, one beneath the altar, one among the pews, both converging. My mind raced. The wrong door. The creature beneath the trapdoor wasn't the one that spoke just now. Something else had been here the entire time. Something that didn't need tunnels, or ladders, or broken trapdoors. I bolted for the sacristy on pure instinct. The side door groaned as I shoved it open, and slammed shut behind me with a snap so loud I felt it in my teeth. Dust swirled in the dim corridor. Shadows clung to narrow stone walls. The sacristy smelled of mildew and old linen, but it was mercifully empty. I leaned against the door, breath ragged. The chapel beyond the door answered my breathing with a faint echo. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. No, not echoing, following. I pressed harder against the door, but something pressed back from the other side. Gently at first, then firmer. Testing, the hinges groaned. A whisper seeped through the wood. "You shouldn't run from us." I didn't wait. I sprinted through the narrow corridor, boots striking stone, turning blindly through an archway that opened into a storeroom. Rusted candelabras and moldy vestments crowded the small space. A single window sat high on the wall, cracked but intact. A way out. I dragged a crate beneath it, climbed up, shoved the window open, and stopped dead. The chapel courtyard lay silent under the darkening sky. Trees swayed gently in a wind I couldn't feel inside. But the soil below the window had shifted, unsettled, as though something had crawled beneath it minutes before. Worse, a line of faint depressions trailed across the courtyard. Footprints leading from the chapel into the ground, not toward the entrance, not toward the ravine, into the earth, as if someone or many someones had climbed out of the soil. My stomach lurched. I started to climb through the window. Toke. A knock struck the stone directly behind me. I twisted around. The sacristy door bulged inward. Once. Twice. On the third hit, a long crack split down its center. I jumped down from the crate, breath shaking, heart sprinting. The door strained again, and whispered, "Let's go together." All at once, the footsteps returned. Not two now. Dozens. From the stone floors, from the walls, from the very foundation beneath my feet. Marching, dragging, climbing, barreling toward me like a rush of bodies moving in the dark. I backed into the crate, hands groping blindly until they found something heavy, an old metal candlestick. Useless, but better than empty hands. The sacristy door split in half. Darkness pooled through the cracks, not shadow, but the absence of light itself, thick and writhing. Within it, silhouettes shifted, bending unnaturally, as though rediscovering the shape of walking. Then, the first figure stepped through the ruin of the door. The pale arm I'd seen before, now attached to a twisted frame of a man bones wrong. Joints stiff, eyes hollow yet fixed on me with unmistakable recognition. He took one dragging step, scrape, step. His lips, not fully lips, just shrunken folds moved. "Don't leave me again." Behind him, more shapes poured through. Some tall, some crawling, some walking with perfect soldierly rhythm, and somewhere among their overlapping footsteps, a new pattern struck the stone. Familiar, measured, almost gentle. Talk, talk, talk. A pattern not from the tunnels, not from the forgotten soldiers, from something else. The one who whispered in the pews, the one who said I'd closed the wrong door. The chapel darkened, the air tightened, the shapes converged. I gripped the candlestick until my knuckles burned, and when the nearest figure reached out, a cold hand stretching across the dim, another voice rose through the mass of whispers, louder than all the others, carving through the cacophony. "He's mine." The shadows surged forward. The world vanished. Darkness swallowed everything. The chapel, the figures, the sound of their dragging limbs. For a moment I thought I had passed out. Then I realized the darkness wasn't empty. It moved. Shapes rippled through it, brushing past me with cold, damp edges, like cloth soaked in groundwater. Whispers threaded through the dark, layered and countless. Mine. No. Ours. Bring him. He opened, and beneath them all, the clearest voice, the one that had claimed me, rose again. Don't struggle. You belong below. A hand closed around my wrist. Not cold, not wet, warm, human. Stand up. A voice hissed right beside my ear. My eyes snapped open. Dim light swam back into view. I was no longer in the sacristy. I was standing at the foot of the altar, breathing hard, sweat soaking my shirt. Everything was exactly as before. The pews, the dust, the broken windows, the open trapdoor. As if nothing had happened, but someone stood behind me. A man, dressed in a tattered wartime coat, boots caked in dried mud, hair matted with soot. His face was sharp, gaunt, eyes dark and restless. His hand gripped my wrist with surprising strength. You shouldn't have answered them, he said. I stared. Who are you? His jaw tightened. The last one who made it out. Before I could react, he yanked me away from the altar just as a pale hand, identical to the one I'd seen earlier, reached up from the trapdoor and grasped at the empty air where I had been standing. The man dragged me toward the chapel doors. They swung open as if pushed from the outside by powerful force. Move, he snarled, before the rest realize you're still here. A chill wind poured into the chapel, and from deep within the tunnels, dozens of voices rose in furious unison. He was ours. The man shoved me into the night. I stumbled onto the courtyard stones, the moonlight cold on my skin. I turned back. He was gone. Only the open chapel doors remained, and from inside, from the darkness beneath the altar, came one last whisper. If he escaped, you will not. The doors slammed shut. Story 4. The room that record silence. I had always believed silence was empty. A void. A lack. A nothingness. That was before I entered the room built to measure it. The research facility lay half buried in the mountains, abandoned after the war. Most of its laboratories were gutted or collapsed, but the anechoic chamber, the silent room, was intact. My assignment was simple: document the interior before demolition crews arrived. When I stepped through the padded doorway, the world vanished. No footsteps, no breath, no heartbeat. My ears strained for sound and found none. The air was too thick, too soft, swallowing every vibration before it had a chance to exist. Then, a faint rustle brushed the wall beside me. I twisted around, pulse spiking. Nothing. Just layers of acoustic foam rising like dark, uneven waves. I waited, breath held, senses reaching into the dead air. Another rustle, behind me this time. And then, a sound that should have been impossible in a room meant to devour noise. A slow, deliberate inhale. Not mine. It came from the far corner, where shadows pooled unnaturally deep, shifting like something listening back. The room was silent, but something inside it was not, and it knew I had stepped in. At first, I tried to rationalize the sound. Old ventilation ducts, settling insulation, residual pressure pockets in an obsolete acoustic chamber. But none of those explanations fit the truth humming beneath my skin. The inhale I'd heard hadn't been mechanical. It had weight, warmth, presence, as if something in the corner had been holding its breath, until I arrived to interrupt the stillness. I stepped deeper into the room, boots sinking slightly into the suspended mesh floor. The padded walls seemed to lean inward, their spiked foam shapes warping in my peripheral vision. Every motion I made, the shift of my jacket, the faint rasp of my sleeve felt wrong here. Too loud. Too intrusive. Like each tiny sound shouted into a cathedral meant for worshipping silence. My torch beam swept across the far corner. Empty. But the sense of being watched tightened around me like a coiled belt. The silence grew so absolute, it pressed into my eardrums, filling my head with thick, suffocating pressure. The absence of noise became noise itself, an aching, internal hum. I lifted my recorder out of habit. The red light blinked on. A soft click, but there should not have been a click. The room was designed so that no mechanical sound could resonate. The door, the floor, the foam, everything absorbed vibration. Yet I heard mine clearly. Too clearly. I tested it again, pressed the recorder's button. Click. The sound bounced back at me. Not as an echo, this room allowed no echoes, but as something else. A mimicry. A repetition. A delayed shadow of sound. Click. The second click was lower, grainier, as though recorded by something deeper inside the chamber. My pulse quickened. Is someone here? My voice died the instant it left my mouth, snatched out of the air by the room's hunger. But a breath later, something answered. Not words. A soft, dragging shift across the foam, like someone repositioning themselves in the dark. I swung my torch toward the sound. Nothing. But the rustling continued behind me, slow, rhythmic movements, brushing along the walls as though something large scraped its fingertips along the foam to test its texture. I turned again too fast this time and nearly slipped on the mesh floor. The light jittered across the chamber, catching only black spikes of acoustic padding waiting like thorns. Silence rushed back in. Then, very faint, barely audible, came a whisper shaped more by breath than voice. You hear better than the others. I froze. The whisper had come from my left. I pointed the torch toward the wall. Foam. Only foam. But the whisper repeated, closer this time. Don't leave. I'm almost loud again. A wave of cold washed across me. Though the room held no draft, my throat tightened with instinct run. But the moment I took a step toward the door, something in the silence shifted. A tension, a thickening, as though the air braced itself. And from the far corner, the darkest one, a soft inhale rose again. Not human, not steady. A hungry breath, learning how to breathe. And this time, it didn't exhale. The inhale held, stretching impossibly long, as though whatever hid in the shadows had lungs far larger than mine, or no need to release air at all. The silence around it tightened, thickened, warped. My ears strained, desperate for the natural relief of an exhale. None came. Instead, the chamber itself seemed to react. The mesh floor trembled beneath my boots, a subtle vibration that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. The acoustic foam spikes along the walls quivered imperceptibly, like black needles responding to a distant tremor. Even the stale smell of dust changed, sharpening with an undertone of something warm and animal. Something breathing me in. I raised my recorder again, my hand shaking. Is anyone in here? Nothing. The recorder's light blinked. The tiny internal motor made its soft mechanical hum, and the room answered it, not with an echo impossible, but with a second hum, deeper and distorted, coming from the opposite wall. Bzzz. Then, Oops, says louder. Wrong. The sound didn't travel through the air. It crawled up the foam, rippled along the mesh floor, and pressed into my ankle like a cold finger. Stop, I whispered. Please stop. The chamber swallowed my voice whole. Then, a new sound rose directly behind me. Click. I spun so fast the torch jerked wildly, splashing fractured light across the walls. Nothing but black foam teeth stared back. No figure. No shadow that wasn't my own. Another click sounded behind me. I twisted again. Nothing. The pattern continued. Click, 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 click. Every time I turned, the sound moved always behind me, always just out of view, circling me inside the dead air. A slow smile of panic pulled at my chest. Is that you? I murmured. The clicks stopped immediately. Then the chamber exhaled. A blast of warm air rushed across my face, thick and damp like breath from something too close and too unfamiliar. I stumbled backward, choking on the heat. My torch dimmed for a second, as though the air itself swallowed its light. And then the whisper came, louder. A shiver clawed its way up my spine. I don't understand. The whisper sharpened, impatient, louder. My recorder crackled in my hand. The signal meter, long dead in the silence, flared to life spiking to maximum as a roar of unseen sound filled the chamber. But I heard nothing. The chamber heard everything. The roar wasn't in my ears. It was in the foam, the walls, the floor. Vibrating so violently, the mesh beneath me pulsed like the skin of a living creature. I staggered. My torch clattered onto the floor, its beam spinning wildly. The roar intensified, still soundless to my ears, but its pressure ballooned inside my skull, pushing against bone, filling my chest with a rising, crushing heaviness. I screamed. The chamber caught my scream instantly, cut it into pieces, swallowed it, then spat it back in a deeper, jagged voice that slipped under my skin. More. Every hair on my body stood on end. I crawled toward the door, fingers slipping on the vibrating mesh. The padded walls bulged inward, as though something behind them pressed forward, drawn by the noise I'd accidentally given. The roar surged again. My eardrums throbbed. My vision flickered. The recorder buzzed so violently it almost stung my hand. Then, I reached the door. I slapped my palm against the handle, but the pressure inside the chamber pinned it shut like a vice. No, I whispered. No, let me out. A final whisper brushed my ear. I can hear you now. The roar stopped. Instant. Absolute. The silence that replaced it was worse, too sudden, too sharp. A knife of quiet cutting through the vibrating air. Behind me, the foam rippled. Footsteps rose on the mesh floor. Soft, measured, human. Step, step, step. A shape separated from the far corner taller than a person, shoulders grazing the padded walls. Its edges smudged like a blurred photograph. It breathed in my direction. Once, twice. Each inhale shook the chamber. Each inhale made my lungs feel smaller. Then, in a voice carved from absolute silence, "Do not leave me alone again." Its first step shook the floor. Its second step dimmed the torch to a thin, dying pulse. Its third step reached the back of my neck, and I realized the chamber hadn't been recording silence all these years. It had been feeding on it. Its breath touched the back of my neck warm, patient, unhurried, the kind of breath someone releases when they're standing too close in a space too small. Except no one should have been able to breathe in here. I pressed my spine against the sealed door, hands shaking on the handle. The mesh floor trembled under the creature's weight. Not heavy, but deliberate. Each step landing with impossible clarity inside a room designed to erase sound. Step. My lungs seized. The air felt thick, nearly liquid, as if the room was growing denser with every breath the thing took. Step. The padded walls bowed inward, pulled toward the creature's shape as if gravity itself bent around it. The foam spikes seemed to reach for it, trembling like grass in a rising wind. My voice cracked. "Don't come any closer." Silence swallowed the words, and then the room gave them back to me in a mutilated, lower register. "Don't come closer." The creature's outline sharpened at the edges, resolving into something vaguely human-shaped. A torso too long, shoulders rising and falling like bellows, head tilted as if listening inside my skull. It inhaled, and my knees nearly buckled, because I felt the inhale drag through me, as if the creature were breathing with my lungs, borrowing their shape, learning how to fill them. I pressed harder into the door. "Stay away." The creature repeated it again, this time with perfect clarity, the exact cadence of my voice. "Stay away." Then, softly, "Why?" Something in the room shifted. A pressure wave swept through the chamber, slamming into my chest. I gasped, stumbling forward, and the creature moved at the same time, intercepting me effortlessly. It didn't touch me. It simply was there, a presence so close it felt like a second skin. Silence rippled around it, a pulsing aura that made the air vibrate like taut wire. I staggered sideways. The creature mirrored me with uncanny precision, always a step behind, always inhaling when I inhaled, exhaling a moment later, as though learning the pattern. Then it spoke again, not mimicking this time, speaking. "You hear me better than the others." It leaned forward, the air around its head distorting like heat coming off metal. A hollow, resonant tone, almost like the thrum of a tuning fork, emanated from its chest, vibrating into mine. "Others." My voice shook. The creature's outline twitched, a shiver of excitement, like it recognized the question. "Yes." "Others came." Its voice deepened, stretching with memory. They made no sound. Its breath brushed my cheek. "But you do." A spike of terror shot up my spine. The chamber, the walls, the floor, even the air tightened around me, responding to my heartbeat, amplifying the sound. I could barely hear myself. I pressed the recorder to my chest and clicked it off. Click. The creature's head jerked sharply toward the device. Its form shivered. Then, click. It repeated the sound low, distorted, eager. It took another step. I took one back. It laughed, a dry, broken sound, as though scraping across jagged stone. "You make wonderful noise." Suddenly, the padded wall behind me bulged inward, as though a hand, no, many hands pressed through from the other side. The foam wriggled, stretching, straining toward me. The creature inhaled again, louder this time, a deep draw that pulled the stale air from the farthest corner of the chamber toward its expanding chest. I felt the room empty, literally empty. The pressure dropped so violently my ears popped. My breath trembled. "Stop, Please stop. The creature leaned close, and for the first time, I saw its face, not features, contours, waves, as though the darkness itself had learned the shape of a person but not the details. It whispered, "Give me what I lost." "What?" My voice broke. "Your silence." With sudden force, the creature lunged, but not at me, at the door. The impact blew every ounce of air from the chamber. My ears rang. The foam shredded around its outstretched arms as it slammed the padded wall again, and again, each strike vibrating through the metal frame. Thud, thud, thud. The door buckled. Cold terror surged through me. If the creature got out, the silent room wouldn't contain it. The world wouldn't contain it. I backed away, fumbling for the torch I'd dropped earlier. The creature stopped striking suddenly. It turned its head toward me, listened, then whispered calm, certain, inevitable. It will be louder outside. It braced itself and launched at the door with every ounce of strength silence had given it. The hinges screamed, the frame cracked, and the chamber, for the first time in decades, made a sound it was never designed to make. A deep, catastrophic boom. Blackness swallowed my vision. Something tore loose. The room finally let the noise out. When I opened my eyes, the silence was gone. Not entirely. There was still a numb ringing at the base of my skull, but the crushing, suffocating absence that defined the chamber had lifted. The air moved. Dust floated. Somewhere in the distance, a supporting beam groaned under its own age. Sound. Blessed, imperfect sound. I lay sprawled in the corridor just outside the chamber's doorway, half buried beneath chunks of fallen foam and twisted sections of the metal frame. My ribs throbbed with each breath, but breath came freely. No invisible weight clamped my chest. For a moment, I dared to hope it was over. The silent room's door lay mangled and half torn from its hinges. Inside, darkness pooled in uneven strips, broken only by slanted blades of hallway light. The chamber looked like a carcass ripped open, gutted, useless. No towering shadow stood in the corner, no trembling foam, no warped outline of a thing that had learned silence too well. I pushed myself upright, coughing dust from my lungs. The corridor hummed faintly, as if the building were exhaling after holding tension for decades. I almost laughed, relief tangled with exhaustion in my chest like warm hands pulling me back to sanity. My recorder lay a few feet away, untouched, except for a thin crack across the casing. The red light blinked steadily calm, controlled, normal. I reached for it. For the first time since entering the chamber, a smile tugged at the edge of my mouth. I made it, I murmured. The words wobbled with fatigue, but they sounded real. They didn't twist or distort or answer themselves in a deeper, hungry register. Just me. I stood, leaning heavily against the corridor wall. Above me, a loose ceiling panel swung gently, tapping in the lingering tremor of the building settling. Tap, tap, tap. A harmless sound. Mechanical, predictable, normal. I breathed out, shaky but steady. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, I'm leaving. I'll call this in. They'll seal the chamber, and this place will finally..." A soft crack split the air. I froze. It didn't come from the ceiling. It came from behind me, from inside the chamber. Slowly, painfully slowly, I turned my head toward the ruined doorway. Silence greeted me, but not the dead, devouring silence from before. A listening silence, a waiting silence. The beam of my torch, miraculously still, functional, trembled across the wreckage. Torn foam, broken mesh, shadows clinging to corners where walls buckled inward. Nothing moved. I exhaled a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My shoulders loosened. I'm imagining things, I whispered to myself. Residual echoes, aftershocks. That's all. My voice trailed off. Something tugged gently at my attention, not a sound, but the lack of one. The corridor hum was gone. The swinging ceiling panel had stopped mid-motion. Even my own breathing felt muted. I lifted the recorder again, bringing it to my lips. Test? No sound came out. Not from me. Not into the recorder. Nothing. A cold ripple crawled up my spine. I tapped the recorder casing. No click. I tried again. Harder. No sound. No vibration. Just an unnatural quiet swallowing each motion whole. My throat tightened. I turned back toward the chamber. Deep in its dark corner, the foam, not the broken foam near the doorway, but the untouched section in the farthest recess shifted. Barely. A tremor, subtle as breath beneath a blanket. Then the whisper came. You opened the door for me. My chest collapsed inward. I stumbled backward, pressing myself against the corridor wall. No, you were in the chamber. You couldn't. The whisper deepened, no longer shaped by air or breath, but pressed directly into the space between my thoughts. I don't need the chamber anymore. The foam in the corner unfurled, stretching outward like a shadow learning its limbs. Then came the worst sound of all. Not a roar, not a scream, not a footstep, a soft inhale, exactly beside my ear. Warm, gentle, grateful. Thank you. The warmth of that inhale froze my entire body. Not cold, not threatening, warm like a hand pressed softly against the side of my face in gratitude. Gratitude from something that should never have learned to breathe. My legs buckled. I dropped the recorder. It hit the floor without a sound, bouncing once, twice, then skidding to a stop. The silence around it swallowed even the vibration. I dared a glance to my left, then wished I hadn't. The shadow stretching along the corridor wall wasn't mine. It rose too high. Its shoulders sloped wrong. Its arms lengthened as though drawn from a well of thick darkness. And it was leaning toward me. I pushed myself backward along the wall, fingers scrabbling for anything, any edge, any ledge to anchor myself to the real world. The corridor tilted. My breathing quickened, desperate, harsh, except it wasn't harsh. It wasn't anything. Each inhale vanished the moment it left my throat, devoured by the air around me. My breath had stopped making sound. No, I whispered, or tried to. You can't take it. That's mine. The reply pressed through the silence like a fingertip pressing through soft clay. You gave it freely. The shadows stretched farther, sliding across the ceiling, rippling over fractured foam, reshaping itself with each movement. It wasn't walking, it didn't need to. It simply shifted, appearing closer each time I blinked. I forced myself upright and lurched down the corridor, boots slamming against the concrete. But the silence ate the sound before it formed. A pressure grew behind me. warm and pulsing, as though the creature's breathing guided my spine one vertebra at a time. I didn't dare look back. I only ran, half blind, one hand on the wall to keep myself upright. The hallway turned sharply. I stumbled around the corner and slammed into the metal railing at the top of a stairwell. My shoulder throbbed, but pain meant I was still alive. Still physical. Still me. I hurried down the stairs 2 at a time. My breath tore at my chest. Yet still made no sound. Behind me, a soft exhale drifted down the stairwell like a warm fog. Slow down. You'll lose your way. A shape flickered at the top of the stairs. A second shape appeared halfway down. A third emerged at the bottom. Shadows of the same figure, as if silence cast infinite reflections, each one closer than the last. I shoved through the stairwell door, bursting into a wide industrial corridor lined with rusted lockers and flickering overhead lights. This part of the facility wasn't soundproof. The world had its noise back. The hum of faulty wiring filled the air. The buzz of fluorescent bulbs. The distant creak of settling foundations. Real sound. Blessed sound. I gulped it down like water. But then something subtle changed. One hum faltered. Another buzz died. A creak cut off mid-strain. One by one, the noises around me flickered out, blinking into nothing as though someone were walking behind me, turning down the volume of reality itself. I ran again. My boots pounded on the tile, but the echo vanished instantly. The corridor bulb ahead of me brightened, then popped in a shower of sparks. I shielded my eyes and kept running. Behind me, the softest whisper followed, barely formed yet unmistakable. Don't run from your own quiet. I reached the end of the hallway and shoved through double doors into the main facility atrium. Tall glass windows lined the walls, streaked with years of grime. A half-collapsed reception desk sagged beneath the weight of broken cables. And far ahead, the exit. A rusted emergency door, still closed, still intact. Hope surged through me. I sprinted across the atrium. The silence followed. Not footsteps, never footsteps, but the feeling of something drifting just behind my shoulder, gliding effortlessly along the floor without disturbing dust or debris. Halfway across the room, the air thickened. A wave of pressure struck my back like a warm tide. Not a blow, a pull. I staggered, catching myself on the edge of a toppled filing cabinet. The silence moved around me, coiling like steam. And the voice came again, closer, clearer, patient. I learned my shape from you. I pressed my palms hard against my ears. No, you're not real. You're not. Silence pressed deeper, slipping through my fingers. I learned your sound, too. A hand, if it was a hand, brushed my shoulder. Weightless, warm, almost gentle, like a child reaching for a parent. I bolted for the exit. My hand struck the metal door. I shoved the bar. It didn't move. I shoved again. Harder. Metal groaned. The mechanism resisted. Then, a single breath warmed the back of my neck. Let me out. I turned the handle with a cry of pure desperation, and the latch gave way. Cold mountain air flooded the atrium. Wind howled. Trees creaked. The world's noise rushed back like an avalanche. I stumbled outside, falling to my knees on the gravel. My lungs sucked in sound-rich air. Terrified and grateful all at once, I turned back. The facility door hung open. Darkness cooled inside the threshold. Still, careful, listening. The silence didn't cross. It hovered at the edge, tasting the new world but not stepping into it yet. Then, from the shadows, a final whisper curled outward, carried not by breath, but by the absence of it. I'll find you when it's quiet again. And the door slowly, gently, began to close itself. The door clanged shut with a hollow finality, sealing the silence inside, or so I prayed. I stumbled backward across the gravel, every instinct urging me to put distance. Trees, mountains, anything between myself and that facility. Wind hissed through the pines. A raven croaked somewhere high above. The world was noisy again, alive again, and each sound landed like a promise that I had truly escaped. But then, something strange happened. The wind died. Not all at once. Not unnaturally. It simply softened, as though muffled by thick snow. The raven fell silent. Even the creak of the treetops dimmed, thinning into a faint, trembling hush. I froze. No, not here. Not outside. My breath misted in the cooling air, and then vanished. Not dissolve. Not fade. Vanished. Swallowed before completing its shape. A sinking dread flooded my chest. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me not to look. I turned toward the facility door. It remained shut, but a hairline line of darkness leaked from the bottom edge. The same darkness I'd seen inside the chamber, crawling like thick oil, seeping into air that was once normal. The line pulsed. Once, twice. Listening, I staggered back and stepped on something. My recorder. I hadn't realized I'd carried it out. Its casing was cracked, but the red light faint, flickering still glowed. Without thinking, I lifted it and pressed play. For a moment, there was only static, then a whisper, my whisper, from earlier in the chamber. Stop. Please stop. But beneath it, layered like breath pressed through dust, came a second voice. I'm outside. I dropped the recorder. It hit the stones, and for the first time since leaving the chamber, the impact made no sound. My pulse hammered. I backed toward the tree line, toward anywhere that wasn't here. Then the final whisper drifted across the gravel, soft as a fingertip across glass. You opened the door for me once. The darkness under the facility door thickened, twisting upward, forming the shape of a long, listening silhouette. You will again. Story 5. The orchard where the trees count backwards. The orchard was never supposed to be there. I'd hiked this trail a dozen times through scrub hills, through empty fields, through the same desolate stretch of wind-bitten country. Nothing ever changed. But that morning, as the fog thinned and the sun rose pale over the ridge, I saw rows of trees where no trees had ever grown. Apple trees, hundreds of them, branches bowed under their own weight, fruit hanging in clusters so heavy they strained the bark. No sign of roots breaking the soil. No sign of irrigation. No sign of planting. As if the orchard had appeared overnight, fully grown, fully ripe. Curiosity pulled me closer. The air smelled wrong sweet. Yes, but something else lingered beneath it. A damp, low note, like earth that had been disturbed too many times. I stepped between the first pair of trees. The fog muffled everything. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Then a sound rose from deeper inside the orchard. At first, it reminded me of leaves rustling, but as I stood perfectly still, listening harder, the truth sharpened. Not leaves, not wind, whispering, repeating numbers, counting down. 7, 6, 5, and the trees swayed toward me. At first I thought the voices were travelers' children, maybe hidden somewhere deeper in the orchard. But no human breath slid between those numbers. No rise or fall. No natural cadence. The counting flowed like a single, unbroken exhale. 5, 4, 4, 4. The last digit repeated, quieter each time, like someone remembering how to speak. Fog curled between the trunks as I moved deeper. The ground felt soft, too soft, like the earth had been turned recently. My boots sank half an inch with each step, releasing a faint, sour scent, as if something rotted beneath the surface. The trees crowded closer the farther I walked. Their branches leaned in from both sides, narrowing the path, not grown that way, but bent, as though something had pushed them from behind. The whispering shifted again. 4, 3. I stopped walking. The trees behind me stopped swaying. The ones ahead kept moving. A slow, deliberate rustling, all shifting in the same direction, all toward me. I swallowed hard. Hello. My voice felt tiny here, swallowed instantly by the dense fog. Nothing answered. Then a single apple dropped from the nearest branch, not fallen thrown. It hit the soil at my feet without bouncing, sinking slightly into the soft ground. Another apple dropped, then another. A soft patter like rain starting, but each fruit landed too heavily, as if filled with something thicker than juice. The whispering deepened. 3, 2, 2, 2. The repetition again, hesitant, uncertain. I took a careful step back. The voices stopped, completely. The orchard froze. No rustling, no counting, no movement. The silence felt tight, stretched thin like a held breath. Then, from directly behind me, so close I felt the warmth of the whisper on my neck. 1. I spun around. Nothing stood there. But the trees had shifted, leaned, forming a narrow corridor that hadn't been there moments before. The branches arched overhead like ribs curling inward, inviting or trapping. I couldn't tell. Something dripped from one of the apples above me. A slow, viscous tap onto my shoulder. I reached up with trembling fingers and recoiled. Not juice. Warm, sticky, metallic, blood. The orchard exhaled all at once, a long, shaking sigh that rustled every leaf and shivered every branch. The countdown began again, but this time from somewhere much deeper in the earth beneath my boots. 7, 6, 5. And with each number, the soil beneath me pulsed, as though something buried there was waking up, listening, and counting along with the trees. The pulse beneath the soil grew stronger, slow, steady thumps rising through the earth like a giant heartbeat buried just below the roots. Thramp, thramp, and layered over it. The whisper counting spread outward through the orchard, no longer coming from a single direction. It moved like wind circling, threading between trunks, slipping along branches with eerie precision. 5, 4, 4, 3. Always repeating one number, like the voice was adjusting itself, tuning itself. I stepped backward from the blood-smeared apple, wiping my fingers on my sleeve. The metallic smell clung to my skin, thick enough to taste. The fog tightened around the orchard's entrance, making the way out look impossibly far. The trees creaked softly, not from wind, from pressure, as if something underneath the soil was pushing upward, shifting root structures like ribs under flesh. I forced myself forward along the tree-formed corridor. Branches curled above me, their leaves trembling despite the utter stillness of the air. The apples hung low now, brushing my shoulders, swinging lightly in a motion that followed me as I walked. I tried speaking again. "Is someone here?" My words thinned instantly, muffled by the fog absorbed, not echoed. The orchard didn't like noise. And then, from directly to my left, so close it vibrated the bark. 3. I turned. A tree trunk stood there, rough, ancient, unmoving, but the whisper had come from inside it. I stepped back cautiously. My boot sank deeper this time, nearly an inch into the soil. It shivered around my foot, then settled. The pulse beneath me steadied. Faster now, more awake. The counting circled me again, quicker, breathy, as though dozens of voices whispered from within hollow trunks and roots and soil. 3, 2, 2, 2, 1. I clamped a hand over my mouth. When the orchard reached 1, the ground always responded, and it did now. The soil beneath my feet contracted sharply, as if gripping me. I yanked my leg free, stumbling into a new row of trees. Their branches shifted, parting slightly, as if making room for me, inviting me deeper. The fog thickened to near opacity. Every direction looked identical. Every tree loomed the same height, the same darkness, the same shape. I tried turning around. Apple-laden branches swung inward, silently blocking the path behind me. A trap. The counting resumed, voices scraping through the air and wood and bark like dry leaves dragged across stone. 7, 6. I felt a tremor run through the orchard, subtle as breath. 5. The apples above me swayed in unison. 4. A low groan rose from the soil, a deep, ancient sound like a wooden door being forced open underground. 3. The earth bulged between the trees, lifting in a long, slow swell. 2. The bulge cracked. A thin line of black soil split open like a pupil widening. 1. The ground beneath the nearest tree collapsed inward with a wet, sucking sound. I staggered back as the tree toppled silently, its roots not tearing, not snapping, but lifting cleanly from the earth, as though they'd never been attached. The trunk hit the ground with a softness that defied its size, and something moved in the pit beneath it. Not an animal, not roots, not water. A shape, rising slowly, coated in soil that dripped in long ropes back into the hollow. It stepped forward. The fog recoiled around the figure's outline, retreating as if making space for it. It looked like a person, but only in silhouette. Too tall, too thin, limbs jointed at angles no human arm or leg could bend naturally. It tilted its head toward me. The orchard fell silent. Then the voices whispered the next number. All at once, from every tree, every root, every pocket of air. 0. The figure straightened fully and stepped out of the hole. The remaining trees leaned toward it, branches bowing like worshippers, recognizing a familiar presence returning to them. The figure lifted one hand, soil dripping from its fingers, and pointed directly at me. The orchard whispered a final word, as quiet as breath, as soft as falling fruit. again, and the counting began anew. 7, 6, 5. The figure took its first step toward me. The figure's first step sank half an inch into the soft soil. Silent, deliberate, wrong. The trees nearest to it leaned as if greeting an old friend. Their branches dipped low, brushing the figure's shoulders, tracing the long line of its spine. Soil slid off its limbs in slow sheets, revealing skin the color of roots kept too long in darkness. My breath caught. The orchard whispered again. 5, 4, 4. The repeated digits scraped through my ears like a blade dragged across stone. The figure tilted its head at the sound, then back at me, as though comparing us, aligning the rhythm of the numbers with the rhythm of my pulse. I took a step back. The figure matched it immediately. No hesitation, no delay, like a shadow correcting itself. Stay back, I croaked. The orchard inhaled. Leaves trembled. Branches creaked softly. Apples swung as if stirred by breath. Breath that wasn't mine. The figure moved closer. Its elbows bent too loosely. Its knees bending inward where no joint should be. Soil clung to its jaw, dripping like dark sap. When it reached the fallen tree, it paused, lowered its head, and pressed a hand to the ground. The soil answered. It pulsed, directly beneath its palm. Thramp, the same buried heartbeat I had felt earlier, but now it matched something else. My heartbeat. The figure seemed to notice. Its head jerked up, gaze sharpening, tracing my chest as though listening through flesh and bone. No, I whispered. Don't sync with me. The orchard whispered the next number. 3. The figure's limbs snapped straight. Its back arched. Its body shuddered violently, as if pulled upward by strings tied to the numbers themselves. Then it lunged. Not fast, not even strong, just certain. A single step forward, perfectly timed with the orchard's breath. Soil splashed upward around its feet, like water disturbed by a stone. I staggered sideways, crashing into a trunk. Apples thudded on my back soft, heavy, bruising but not rolling away when they hit the ground. They simply sank, absorbed. The figure reached the spot where I'd been standing. Its hand hovered in the fog, fingers bending inward and outward like something learning how to grasp. 2. The trees behind me shifted, branches weaving together into a wall. The orchard was closing the exits one by one. Stop, I hissed. Just stop. The figure stopped instantly. It didn't freeze. It didn't hesitate. It obeyed. My pulse hammered. The soil pulsed with it. The figure tilted its head again, listening, adjusting. A new whisper traveled up through the ground beneath my boots. Thinner, shakier, like a child reciting numbers it didn't yet understand. 1. The figure lowered into a crouch. Soil trembled. Roots quivered. Something beneath the orchard answered the countdown. I felt it before I saw it. A rumble underfoot, rising through the earth in slow, deliberate waves. The figure reached toward me with both arms, palms open, as if inviting me to imitate it. I backed away. The figure's arms fell, and then it stood, straightened, and lifted one foot. The lifted foot did not fall. It hovered, held there by a force that wasn't gravity or muscle. The orchard whispered the final number, so softly I barely heard it. 0. A shockwave shuddered through the entire orchard. The soil compressed beneath me so hard I nearly fell to my knees. Branches snapped into new angles. Fog collapsed inward, curving around the figure's body like ribs folding around a lung. And then the figure moved. Not toward me, through me. It stepped forward, but its limb passed through the tree trunk beside me as though the bark were smoke. The trunk shook violently, leaves raining down in a panicked cascade. The figure did not notice. It continued moving, drifting closer, its joints bending backward with each step. The air chilled. My breath came in shorter bursts. Then its face, if it was a face, tilted inches from mine. A smooth, root-pale surface with faint impressions where features might have been long ago. And beneath the surface, a shifting glow, like a heartbeat buried inside a seed. The figure inhaled, branches bent toward it. Roots stirred beneath us. Then it whispered, not the next number, not the countdown, but my name. And the orchard whispered it back. And every tree, every branch, every trembling root, all of them speaking in unison. My name drifted through the orchard like drifting pollen soft, weightless, yet carrying a density that pressed against my ribs. Hearing it echoed by the trees, by the roots, by the breath of the soil itself, struck something deep and instinctive inside me. I stumbled backward until bark pressed against my spine. Apples thudded softly against my shoulders as branches shifted to frame me gently, almost supportively, like guiding hands. The figure stood motionless before me, head still tilted, listening, the way a child listens when learning something new. No, I whispered. Don't say my name. The orchard whispered it again anyway, this time quieter, more precise, pronounced with growing confidence. The figure shivered, its arms lowered, its posture softened. The tension in its limbs, those impossible, root-colored joints seemed to loosen, and for one fragile moment, the orchard stilled. The soil no longer pulsed beneath my boots. The branches stopped creeping overhead. The fog thinned slightly, drifting into harmless ribbons of white. The figure took a slow step back. I didn't trust it. But the sudden lull in pressure, the way the world felt less suffocating, less crowded by unseen intent, my mind leapt to a dangerous, desperate conclusion. It's calming down. I exhaled a shaky breath. My heartbeat slowed. My palms loosened. I spoke as gently as I could. You don't have to follow me, I said. I'm leaving. I won't disturb this place. Just stay here. The figure swayed, as though tasting the words, translating them into movements it understood. Then it lowered to a crouch, its fingers brushing the soil. The orchard whispered something different this time. Not numbers, not my name. Something like a sigh of wind moving through hollow wood. Rest. The word washed over me in a warm wave. My shoulders sagged with exhaustion. My knees weakened. Reliefful, deep, almost narcotic flooded my body. It's over, I murmured. The figure stayed crouched, its posture gentled even further. Head bowed, penitent, harmless. For the first time, its shape looked small. I dared a step forward. It didn't move. Another step. Still nothing. My fear unfurled into something like pity. Was it trapped here? Bound by the orchard's strange gravity? Waiting for someone for centuries? Maybe. The trees behind me relaxed. Their branches lifted a little, no longer blocking the path quite so aggressively. Fog parted just enough to reveal a vague direction, a possible way out. I swallowed hard, forcing clarity into my voice. "I'm going," I said softly. "Stay here. Rest." The figure dipped its head lower. The soil it touched seemed to accept it, settling peacefully around its fingers. I inched backward, eyes fixed on the creature. 5 steps. 10. 15. The branches didn't follow. The fog didn't tighten. A breeze brushed my cheek. The first natural movement of air since entering the orchard. Relief bloomed again. I turned slightly, just enough to glance at the clearing that seemed to appear ahead. A narrow gap between trees that looked almost like a path leading out. Just a few more meters. Just a few breaths. Behind me, the orchard remained quiet, almost gentle, almost asleep. I allowed myself finally to breathe in something that felt like hope. Then, a sound cracked the air. Crunch, like a bone snapping underfoot. I froze. The orchard froze with me. Silence stretched taut as wire. Slowly, heart pounding, I turned back. The figure hadn't moved. Its head was still bowed, its posture still soft. But the soil beneath it, that was moving, not pulsing, not breathing, sinking. Its crouched legs slid downward an inch, then 2, then more. The earth swallowed its hands first, then its forearms. The figure didn't resist. It simply sank, peacefully, as if yielding to gravity that wasn't gravity at all. The orchard whispered, "Rest, rest, rest." The figure's head dipped below the soil. Only the top of its skull remained visible. Then, with a gentle, almost tender sound, temp, the earth closed over it. No struggle, no violence, just burial. A burial the orchard clearly wanted. My breath trembled. The trees rustled again, but softly this time, empathetic, satisfied. "It's over," I whispered again, voice cracking in something almost like gratitude. But before the last word left my lips, a hand erupted from the soil, grabbing my ankle, cold, wet, strong. Not the figure's hand. Too many fingers. Too small. Too tight. The orchard whispered one more word, and this time it wasn't gentle. "Rise." All around me, the ground began to crack. The fingers around my ankle tightened small, numerous, impossibly strong. Not a single hand, not a person. A cluster of hands, child-sized, root-thin, wrists wrapped in dirt as though grown rather than born. I screamed and kicked instinctively. My boot connected with something soft, then something hard beneath it, like bone wrapped in damp bark. The grip loosened just enough for me to wrench my leg free. The ground convulsed. Soil split open in a jagged circle around me, widening with each pulse of the buried heartbeat. Fog thrashed in sudden spirals, sucked downward into the opening earth, like breath being inhaled by something enormous. The orchard began counting, not the soft, drifting whisper from before, a chant, united, rising from every tree at once. 5, 4, 3, too fast, too prepared. The countdown was not a warning though, it was a trigger. I turned and ran. The trees reacted instantly, branches whipping into my path. Apples struck my shoulders, my face heavy. Wet thuds. Juice sprayed across my cheek. Except it wasn't juice. It was warm, metallic, red, too. The orchard lurched. Roots burst from the soil like skeletal arms, dragging themselves upward, writhing toward my legs with terrifying precision. Some were thin as rope, others were thick as wrists, split with knuckles of hardened wood. I dodged righted, just as a root snapped upward like a striking snake, catching only the hem of my jacket. I tore free, stumbling onto a patch of firmer ground. Briefly, too briefly, the soil ahead bulged again, this time not upward, but outward, like something underground pushing against the orchard's limits. The bulge rippled, cracked, and split open in a long vertical line. A figure rose from inside. Another. Not like the first creature that had followed the countdown. These were smaller, hunched, bodies of soil and bark, and something vaguely human, their limbs trembling as though newly formed. They lifted their heads in unison. Their mouths, with the slits stretching across their faces, were mouths opened, and the orchard reached 0, 1. Silence fell. Then the creatures screamed. The sound did not pierce the air. It pierced the ground, vibrating upward through my boots, my bones, my teeth. The soil shuddered so violently I almost fell. To move, I shouted at myself. I sprinted between 2 rows of trees, heart pounding, lungs tearing for air that felt too thick to breathe. Branches lashed at me like lashes of rope. Roots surged from the earth, twisting into knots in my path. Behind me, the creatures scrambled after me, their limbs sharp and jutted at angles no living thing could run with. Yet they moved with horrifying speed, driven by the orchard's pulse. The countdown started again. 7. I ducked beneath a branch. An apple burst beside my ear like a rotten heart. 6. Something grazed my back, a root, or a hand, or a piece of the orchard itself trying to pull me under. 5. I broke through a curtain of fog and stumbled into a small clearing. Flattened earth. No trees. In the center stood a stump. Massive. Old. Split down the middle by lightning or time. The wood pulsed faintly with leftover warmth. The orchard whispered around me like breath against my ear. Here. No. Not here. Not this place. Anything but this place. 4. The ground beneath the stump shivered. The same buried heartbeat right beneath it. Understanding hit me with cold clarity. This clearing was the center. The heart. The place all countdowns converged on. And they were forcing me here. I spun to run back. The trees had moved. They formed a wall of trunks and branches, knitted together like a cage. Fog rolled downward in heavy sheets, sealing the gaps. The orchard whispered, "Stay." The soil vibrated under my boots. 3. I backed away from the wall of living wood until my legs pressed against the stump. The heartbeat beneath it quickened, matching my pulse, syncing perfectly, eagerly. Something below was pushing upward. 2. A crack formed at the center of the stump, a thin line of darkness stretching like a widening mouth. No. 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 I slammed my heel against the wood. The stump groaned. Something beneath it groaned back. The creatures burst into the clearing, a dozen now, maybe more. Their bodies shook with each number, limbs twitching, jaws stretching, They circled me slowly. None attacked. They were waiting. One. The stump split entirely. A rush of hot air blasted upward, carrying with it the scent of roots and rot and age. Hands, too many, rose from the crack. Gray, root-wrapped fingers grasped the stump's edges, pulling something enormous upward. The orchard whispered the final word. Rise. A head surfaced. The same figure from before, but larger, taller, fully grown from the soil. It stood before me, soil cascading from its shoulders, joints cracking loudly with each new moment of life. Then it extended one hand, palm open, patient, as if offering me a choice that wasn't a choice at all. Behind me, the smaller creatures leaned in. The trees bent. The fog held its breath. The figure whispered, "You counted with us. Now you finish it." I grabbed the nearest apple from the branch brushing my arm and slammed it into the stump's cracked heart. The orchard screamed. A blast of air hurled me backward as the stump erupted inward, not exploding, but imploding, collapsing into a pit of churning soil and roots. The creatures shrieked and clawed at the ground. The trees writhed violently. The fog whipped upward like torn cloth, and the figure, the tall one, turned its head sharply toward the imploding stump, a fraction of distraction. My only chance. I sprinted. Branches tore at my skin. Soil tried to grab my ankles. Whispers lashed my ears like cold fingers. But the trees were disoriented, their rhythm broken, their countdown severed. I reached the orchard's edge. Fog parted. Light, real light, poured in. Behind me, the orchard whispered in a single, shuddering voice, "Iziro." The ground lunged, but I leapt out. I rolled onto hard, dry earth beyond the orchard's boundary. Silence, wind, birdsong, normal behind me. The orchard stood completely still. The trees no longer swayed. The fog settled low like exhausted breath. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the nearest tree bent slightly, as if acknowledging my escape, and whispered one last promise. Again, I lay on the dry earth, lungs heaving, throat raw from breathing air that finally belonged to the world again. The orchard loomed behind me, silent, still, its branches hanging like exhausted limbs after a long ritual. No whispers, no countdown, no movement. For the first time since stepping between the trees, I felt the shape of my own breath, the sound of it, the weight in my chest that was mine alone. I almost wept, but relief true. Clean relief lasts only a moment in places touched by things that should not wake. As I pushed myself onto shaky legs, the silence behind me shifted, not loudly, not violently, just shifted. A soft thump, like a single apple falling. I didn't turn around. Another thump, a second apple, then a third. A slow, uneven rhythm, not falling from above, thrown. My heart dropped. I turned. The orchard had not changed, but the ground at the boundary exactly where I'd crawled out was no longer smooth. It bulged, just slightly, like breath pushing upward beneath stretched skin. I stepped back. The soil twitched again, and from deep under the surface came a whisper, not from a tree, not from the fog, not from the creatures that had risen from the earth, but from the tall figure itself. still buried somewhere beneath the orchard. Its voice pressed through layers of dirt. You escaped on zero. The bulge grew, cracked. A thread of dark soil spilled outward like a reaching finger. Next time, another whisper rose beside my ear, but there was nothing there. Only open air, only sky, only the trembling memory of trees behind me. We start at 9. The soil split wide. Something moved underneath, straining upward. And just before I turned and ran, the orchard whispered one final truth in a single, gentle exhale. We count better above ground. And now, listener, our night together grows thin. If your room feels quieter than before, if the dark corners seem a little deeper, if some small sound doesn't quite belong, don't worry. Stories have a way of following gently, the way a footstep follows another in soft earth. Close your eyes. Let the echoes settle. Let the shadows find their places. And if, by chance, any voice whispers to you before sleep, a voice that sounds almost like your own, just breathe slowly. Let it pass. Let it fade. Not every whisper means to be heard tonight. Sleep well, listener, and when the next story calls, you'll hear me again.